It was the 10th of April, 2019 year. Charlie, sitting on a hospital bed, desperately tried to reach out to her boyfriend in the chat, but he didn't respond. She could not allow him to just disappear and leave her in the hospital at the end of her life's journey. When the nurse entered the ward to take care of Charlie, she was shocked. Charlie had disappeared. The fugitive stood on the street under a blooming cherry tree and thought that it was unfair of nature to allow flowers to bloom when she herself was dying of cancer. To get home, the girl took a taxi. The kind driver reminded her of her late father, whom she still loved very much. Wanting to cheer her up, the driver gave the girl some money and asked her to be happy. A yellow candy was wrapped in the banknote, the very one that Charlie's father had once given him, leaving a warm memory in her mind. The girl finally reached home. By the door lay on the floor not only men's shoes but also carelessly discarded women's shoes. Stepping over the clothes scattered on the floor, the blonde woman went deeper into the house. "What is this?" In the doorway, she saw her boyfriend Parker. He was lying in bed with some girl and happily discussing the insurance he would receive after Charlie's death. A terrible realization overwhelmed the girl. In bed with Parker was her friend Lucy. Charlie burst into the room, interrupting the conversation. Lucy rushed to her former friend, vainly trying to calm her down and convince her that it was not what she thought. Of course, the girl did not soften. She began to threaten that the whole internet would soon find out what these two were up to, and even Lucy, who fell to her knees, could not stop her anger. However, her friend made a fatal mistake by saying that the living should live, and Charlie couldn't restrain herself. She rushed at her with her fists. Parker did not stand aside. Defending his new girlfriend, he slapped his ex. This finally plunged Charlie into shock. She screamed that this man had no right at all to even raise his voice at her, since he lived on her money. Then Parker delivered a second, stronger blow. The girl fell to the floor like a doll. Traders were overwhelmed by a terrible realization. It seems Charlie is dead. Her last memory was again connected with her father. When they saw each other for the first time, young Charlie promised her father to always be happy and live a good life. But it seems her colleague woke her up. A rejuvenated and completely healthy Charlie stared at herself in the mirror in astonishment. Hadn't she died a few minutes ago? On the table lay a pink telephone that the girl had used 10 years ago. The screensaver displayed a photo where she was smiling happily next to Parker. The numbers were clearly visible. April 10th, 2009. The realization washed over the heroine. It seemed she had gone back 10 years. Interrupting the shock, Parker entered the office. Charlie felt a new surge of hatred. Just a few minutes ago, he had participated in her murder, and now he was smiling joyfully. The guy was confused. He clearly did not expect such a reaction and did not know what to say. The girl's memory resurfaced memories in which there was the face of her ex-boyfriend, distorted by hatred and malice, and a crying friend. Charlie ran past without trying to appear deceptively friendly. She had clearly realized that something had gone wrong, but still tried to stop her. The girl wrenched her hand out of his grip and screamed for him not to approach her or even talk to her. In the midst of the conflict, Lucy entered the office to find out why these two were making such a racket. Charlie's nerves, exhausted by the recent events, couldn't take it anymore, and tears of anger streamed down her cheeks. At that very moment, the manager's assistant, Yanin, intervened in the situation. She also came to say that the conflict had become too noisy, as well as to inform that the manager was looking for the culprit of the noise. Jeremy, the manager, is a businessman who once seemed to be the nicest and most impartial person in the department. He let Charlie go, informing her that the work was already done, and handed her a folder with documents on which a blue scarf lay. It probably belonged to the boss. Stung by the request to stop bothering the employees with personal questions, and still disoriented after being resurrected, the girl stumbled and fell to the floor. However, she was not destined to fall. Jeremy caught her. It was his first touch of her. Charlie did not expect this and was in a hurry to leave, so she quickly recoiled from the young man and slipped away. Her determination to leave, or rather to leave forever, knew no bounds. Without saying goodbye to her boyfriend or her friend, and even forgetting her bag at her workplace, the girl left the office. The memory of the manager would not leave her head, coexisting with an attempt to understand what was happening at all. This pensiveness did not play into the heroine's hands again, and she stumbled again, this time on her way out of the elevator. Now there was no one to catch her. On the street, spring was back again. The cherry tree was blooming pink again. Sitting on the bus, Charlie kept trying to figure out if it was a dream and if she could change her future. Her reflections were interrupted by the manager's work call. It was clearly more pleasant to receive it than another call from Parker. Putting the phone in her pocket, Charlie experienced another shock on this difficult day. It couldn't be that she didn't imagine it. It was completely real. In Charlie's hand lay a banknote and a yellow candy, the same one that a kind taxi driver had given her in her past life, and the same one that her father had given her for the last time. The memory of her father, to whom she had promised to live happily, made the girl cry again. From the heavy emotions, Charlie was distracted by Parker's next call. Doesn't he understand that she no longer wants to hear him? At the same time, Parker himself was looking at his phone, trying to understand why the previously compliant girl was not responding to him. Lucy turned to the guy, asking if his friend had at least replied to him to distract him from his gloomy thoughts. Having learned that this had not happened, the girl suggested that they all go out to eat some chicken. She seemed to glow with happiness as she made this suggestion. The moment of enlightenment was short-lived. Their conversation was interrupted by the manager, clearly displeased that his employees were not thinking about work. Parker felt that he was always subjected to an unreasonably large number of complaints. Lucy also could not get through to Charlie. This situation prompted her to think that her friend was behaving completely differently than before, and she clearly didn't like it. Charlie had already arrived home by that point. It seems the password for the front door was Parker's birthday. She did not hesitate before changing the password. It became today's date, the day of the beginning of a new life. It was strange for her to return to her home from a decade ago. For the last time she was there, she learned of infidelity and betrayal. But on the table were joint photos with Parker and Lucy, and also a toy that a friend once gave her. All these things went into the trash. She no longer needed them. Here's what she really needed: a savings book with the money from the survivor's benefits. The girl used it to pay off the loan and rent. Charlie realized here that there was a solution to her financial problems, and the name of this solution was Parker, a stock-obsessed guy who knew what and when to buy and sell. She decided that she couldn't let such an opportunity slip away. The guy reminded her of himself again, inviting her to eat some chicken together in a text message. Of course, she didn't want to go, but she really wanted to move and settle scores with him. Parker was very worried, looking at the phone screen. What had gotten into Charlie? And again, the manager pulled him out of his world. He didn't like that the young man was sitting on his phone instead of working. Instead of this negligent attitude, the manager demanded reports that should have already been submitted by this point. Parker made them, but he made a mistake, forgetting to bring the last report. He was delighted with this situation. The manager was of the same age as him, but higher in position and also made the young man work. But Lucy did not let him down again, with a sweet smile sticking a sticker to his monitor with a suggestion to eat together. Parker was only too happy to receive this attention and responded with agreement, inviting her to meet him near the kiosk. The work went more pleasantly after that, but the guy was thinking again not about work, but about the fact that he should tidy up the car before Lucy's arrival. Charlie was carefully choosing what to wear at that moment, trying to remember how she dressed 10 years ago. Makeup also raised questions. It seems that back then she didn't wear any, but now she wanted to go out looking her most beautiful. And she used to curl her hair before. Why not do it now? However, after plugging the fork into the outlet, the girl dropped her phone on the floor. In a past life, the same thing happened, and then she burned herself picking up the phone. This time, everything went well, and there was no mark on the arm. It meant that the past could be changed. Parker wrote that he was already on his way, and not empty-handed, but with some kind of gift. 10 years ago, this gift turned out to be Lucy, with whom he had just agreed to eat some chicken. This memory led Charlie to an interesting thought. Why should she resist the rapprochement of these two? They are so good together, they enjoy communicating. The realization was swift and cruel. Let them be together, since she no longer needs either of them. And there Charlie was already waiting in the cafe, surrounded by people who couldn't care less about her problems. They finally appeared, happy in each other's presence, Parker and Lucy. While placing the order, the girl was thinking not about what she wanted, but rather about how much her friend annoyed her. Attention was also drawn to Lucy's earrings. She gave the same ones to her friend, but they only suited one of them, and that person was not Charlie. The traitor happily chattered, telling how strong their friendship was and how much they loved exactly the same things. Lucy especially insisted that Charlie had grown into a beauty, while she herself remained as she was in 5th grade, although it was obvious to everyone that she radiated beauty and joy. She couldn't help but compare her little palm with Parker's big palm. They drank together, but the main heroine was determined to bring them to light and not miss a single little lie and setup. Finally, they brought the chicken. Charlie ate it with pleasure, although Lucy grimaced. There's the lie. Last time, her friend ate 3 whole portions, and now she was flirting in front of Parker. The fragile balance was interrupted by a waitress who was accidentally pushed by an intoxicated visitor. Hot dishes touched Charlie's hand, miraculously without staining it. But the most terrifying thing was not this. The burn would be right where in a past life there was a trace left by a curling iron. Of course, the girl refused her friend's hypocritical help and ran to the bathroom. There, holding her hand under cold water, she despairingly thought that it seemed the old events would still happen one way or another. No, she will not allow this life to break her again. Meanwhile, Lucy was already drunk from just 1 shot of alcohol. Her face was flushed, she behaved loudly and merrily. It was easy for Charlie to conclude that 3 or 4 glasses were enough to completely throw her friend off balance. And Parker kept pouring her alcohol, keeping up the conversation about how he liked his girlfriend's kindness and hard work. All this was terribly irritating, and of course the heroine did not stand on ceremony with her friend, who was brazenly asking to feed her fish. In the end, the girl could not stand it and decided to get rid of her altogether. Watching the departing taxi, Charlie thought how nice it was to be in peace and quiet again. Parker without Lucy became sad. It was fun with her, she laughed and joked, but his girlfriend seemed to be out of this world. Besides, he did not fail to note aloud that the departed girlfriend was very sweet and slender. Having been left alone, they continued drinking. Charlie honestly admitted that she had come not to eat, but to get drunk. When she took off her glasses, her beautiful face was revealed, and Parker emphasized this out loud. It turned out that the heroine was prevented from undergoing laser vision correction by the cost of the operation. She was hoping for an imminent salary increase. So, left together, they talked and talked, discussing both the shares and everything else that came up. Finally, Parker escorted her and affectionately wished her good night. He kissed Charlie on the forehead in farewell. It was the most disgusting thing that could happen, but for now she couldn't show it. Upon her return, the girl was bombarded with messages in which the guy explained what stocks she should invest in and how. Yes, this is exactly what she needs. Charlie called in sick on her day off so she wouldn't have to meet Parker. Instead, she went to the bookstore. Her goal was books about stock trading, although they seemed too complex for an unprepared person to understand. On the top shelf, there should have been a more suitable book. However, the top shelf is the top shelf so that it would be difficult to reach it, but a taller man helped the heroine. This man turned out to be Jeremy's manager, who decided that the girl had decided to quit since she was interested in stocks. Charlie rushed to dissuade him. Of course not. She was just curious about what her boyfriend was interested in, nothing more. At some point, the manager started talking, seemingly trying to offer the girl something, but she accidentally interrupted him, saying that she didn't want to go anywhere on the weekends, and that's why she was asking him not to tell Parker about her presence. Jeremy didn't finish his sentence, but complimented Charlie's earrings. She had finally replaced Lucy's gift with something more suitable for her. Of course, she always knew that those earrings were not the best choice. Charlie came to work very early, thinking about how nice it was to be the first one in the office. However, it turned out that Jeremy had been there before her. The manager was sleeping at his workplace, and his face looked even better and neater without glasses. The presence of the girl woke him up. The charm of the dream was shattered. Having set off for work, Charlie thought about how the manager had called her by her first name, omitting the usual form of politeness, and that was strange. But the manager's eccentricities were not what she should have been thinking about. After all, she had come to take care of her business. Guided by what Parker wrote and said, Cherry began buying up shares. At some point, the work was interrupted. A glass of coffee landed on the table next to the keyboard. The manager carefully brought an Americano and a sandwich. Charlie's first thought was to refuse this unsolicited care, for it was so habitual. But this habit was burdensome and ruinous, so the girl decided to give it up in her new life and joyfully accepted the treat. An hour passed and the stocks were bought. Large sums of money were invested in successful and promising companies. At this point, other employees began to arrive as well, including Lucy and Parker, who of course came together. A friend rushed towards Charlie with her usual joy, but she cut her off, asking her to communicate with her exclusively in an official format at work. Parker wondered since when Charlie drank Americano instead of her usual cappuccino. The girl mentioned the manager, thinking to herself with regret that he was not a sugar maniac, unlike Parker. And so the guy sat down at his computer. Now he had to start buying up stocks. But he sold all the shares of Pharmaceutics, a company that was soon to become profitable. Why did he do that? By 9 o'clock, Charlie's plans began to unravel. If someone had told Charlie that her intentions would crumble so quickly and easily into pieces, she would never have believed it, but right now she could clearly see the sell button on the guy's screen. One thought after another flashed through her head. This company had brought and should continue to bring profit percent by percent, so what was wrong? Despair threatened to engulf him completely. From her gloomy thoughts, the girl was torn away by Parker himself. Why was she so serious? It turns out he sold the shares because he had already made a profit from them and wanted to invest the money in the MW company engaged in advanced technologies. Parker suggested keeping this a secret and reported it as a big secret, but Charlie, living her life for the second time, knew without him how promising this company was. Last time this did not happen. The girl was finally convinced events could be changed. Moreover, they would affect all people, not just her alone. In any case, it's too early to break with Parker completely. It's high time to invite him to eat in the cafeteria. Someone mentioned that they serve delicious chicken there. Of course, it didn't go without Lucy. They'll go eat together. But such is the reality, there's no escaping from one's best friend. Besides, her presence did not go without a pleasant compliment. Today, Charlie was wearing a new blouse, more beautiful than her usual clothes. What did it end with in the previous life? Oh yes. Of course, the blouse was accidentally ruined by Lucy, who spilled a whole plate of bright red soup on it. After that, Charlie never wore it again. And here they are again in the dining room, and here her friend is asking for more soup to be poured for her. How unpleasant it is to watch this, knowing why she is asking the cook for this. So, Lucy turns around. It's time to be on the alert. 3, 2, 1. Charlie is on the alert. She won't let this happen again. It's time to step aside. Oops, it seems the soup landed on the wrong person, not who Lucy was aiming for. The shirt is hopelessly ruined, though it's a different shirt now. The girl was disconcerted. This was something she did not expect, that her dear Parker would become a victim and a huge, practically indelible stain would spread across his chest. The young man grimaced, trying to force a smile and convince himself that nothing terrible had happened, but honestly, he was so sorry to lose such a precious shirt. It's high time to send Lucy for napkins, and at the same time admire her bewildered face. Of course, it wasn't her who used to run to the restroom for this before, but Charlie. She tried to hide it, but it was obvious. The girl was incredibly dissatisfied with the results of her sabotage. Charlie also went to the restroom to wash her hands, least of all expecting new twists of fate from this place. But the turn did not make itself wait. Some girl from one of the booths was desperately asking for help. Of course, the heroine could not refuse a small request and brought the stranger a cosmetic bag and her sweater so that she could cover herself if necessary. The unfortunate one turned out to be Utah, a young employee who got a job some time ago at the same time as Lucy. She turned out to be perhaps even too grateful for her rescue and began calling Charlie her angel. However, such bright, positive emotions were understandable. It turned out that some time ago another girl had entered the toilet who had rudely refused to help. Unlike her, Charlie turned out to be very kind and freed from captivity, a person who risked missing lunch, and with it, possibly the rest of the working day. Lucy did not waste time. She made every effort to make Parker forget who and how ruined his shirt, and chattered incessantly about what a responsive person she was. Of course, it was pleasant for the young man to be in her company. Moreover, they discussed Charlie as well, though not in the best light. The focus was again on how unsociable she was at school and how much Lucy was always helping her out. Perhaps Parker would have found slightly less pleasure in her presence if he had seen the viciousness with which she had torn the napkins in the restroom 10 minutes ago. By the way, it was Lucy who turned out to be the person who refused to help Utah. She flew out of the bathroom, slamming the door deafeningly and calling the situation a circus to herself. Ah, what magnanimity. But now she changed her mask to a friendly one. She could not appear rude to Parker, no way. Charlie, who had returned, brought Utah with her, and this was a big surprise for those present. Lucy couldn't even fully control her facial expression. Since when have the two of them been friends? But of course it would be impossible to refuse a place at the table. Utah livened up the atmosphere at the table considerably. She was not shy about laughing loudly and behaved very spontaneously. She reminded Parker again about his ruined shirt, making the hair on Lucy's arms stand on end. To change the subject, she began to draw attention to how much Charlie's new acquaintance eats. The arrow flew into the milk. The girl was not at all embarrassed that she had a good appetite, a healthy mind and a healthy body. Lucy thought that she was surprisingly ugly, and she also asked a rather impolite question. Who exactly did Utah's grandfather work as to instill such proper thoughts in her? And he worked as a salesman and a cook. Not the most prestigious professions, but this clearly did not bother her. It's time to say goodbye, but what meal would be complete without a delicious coffee? Utah preferred an Americano, while Lucy rushed in a wave of friendliness with a request to buy a cappuccino. Charlie recoiled her hand with disgust. Her preferences of the new girlfriend interested her much more than the saccharine lies of the old one. After that, she could leave without regrets. Utah and Lucy were left alone, and their attention was drawn to Charlie's sweater. Lucy then learned the story of how it happened. Regret hit her under the ribs. She could have helped herself. It would have cost her nothing. Well, nothing. You can always confirm your status as a good girl. Charlie did it because she constantly pokes her nose into other people's business. Such an awfully intrusive one, right? Utah should be more careful with her, who if not her best friend would know. The feint failed. Lucy was quickly reminded that asking about other people's relatives was also more than tactless. Yes, and the girl also knew perfectly well that it was she who did not help and left, slamming the door. It seems this new girlfriend is not as simple as she seems. What if she starts a rumor? Salvation came from where they did not expect it. The balding fatso rolled up as if from nowhere. This beamed with the happiness of the meeting the head of the department, Smith, naively believing in the compliment to his tie. Lucy did not fail to complain about both Utah's callousness and Yanan's indifference. She would kick them out of the game before they even realized they were in it. Smith was terribly outraged. How dare they offend such a beauty? That is, such a valuable employee. While he burned with righteous anger, she pondered what to do. The abacus clicked in her head. Ah, yes. Why not invite the boss to have a drink together? At that moment, Charlie was waiting for an order at the cafe. In addition to what her friends asked for, she decided to add some cereal to give it to Jeremy, who had missed lunch. Everything confirmed again. The world could be changed. She would not sink into the suffering that had enveloped her former life. And Jeremy was dozing off in his chair again. How tired he gets. A fragile moment was interrupted. It was Parker who burst into the office and roughly grabbed Charlie by the arm, intending to take her away with him. Of course, she is not going anywhere with him when he behaves like that. Here the help came just in time. Jeremy woke up and made Parker stop. Again, he is portrayed in an unfavorable light before his superiors. And it seems that the authorities are barely restraining themselves from raising a hand against him, just as she tried to raise it against Charlie. Parker was so angry that sparks were practically flying off him, but Jeremy was also almost freezing with his gaze. Predictably, the one with the lower position lost the battle of stares. The boss had only to thank for the flakes. And Charlie could only wonder, wasn't Jeremy angry that she had woken him up and brought her problems out in the open again? And she still had to deal with the evil-as-hell Parker. His evil face again reminded of how in a past life he shouted with some completely inexplicable hatred. It reminded her of how he used to beat her. Not again? And even though nothing threatened here and now, it still became terribly uncomfortable. But Yanina did not pass by. Her friendly, thin hand fell on the shoulder, calming. They went to drink tea. Coffee seemed too heavy a drink for such a situation. How valuable support is at the right moment. However, Charlie still chose to say that she had simply overworked. Now she is receiving support and is ready to provide it. But in her previous life they were not friends at all, and Yanin quit, unable to withstand the humiliation from her boss Smith. Back then, in the past, she was too deeply immersed in her thoughts to notice the good people around her. Here is Utah thanking for the coffee, bright and joyful, even though they had only brought her coffee. The three girls started looking at photos of Yanina's daughter. Oh, what a cutie she is. While they were cooing over the baby, Lucy stood aside. But as soon as she called out to this company, everyone hurriedly scattered about their business. In fact, the reason was the appearance of Smith, but who would say that? Well, let them run, let them... At least the boss saw how unfriendly they were to her. It was time to leave. But Charlie was scared. Would Parker be waiting for her at home? She will, and she knows it, but she can hide out for a while at work, in the bathroom, where no one will bother her. Half an hour, is that enough for him to leave? Perhaps, but not enough for Jeremy to leave. And it seems he was waiting for her specifically. Would Charlie refuse his offer to give her a ride? No, she won't refuse, even though it's a bit awkward. They were never close. Interesting, there was a woman's lipstick in the car. Whose is it? The girl's? Of course, it would be strange if the handsome Jeremy didn't have a girlfriend. And Parker waited. All this time he stood in the parking lot calling Charlie. When they were passing by, she could not restrain herself and hurried to cover her face, turning away from the window with an expression of fear. But the glass is tinted. The boss, whose attention did not miss this nervous reaction, informed her. She hurried home, and he allowed himself to stand for a few minutes at the open door, looking after her. Having got into the car, Jeremy took the call, mainly to refuse to do anything and meet anywhere, citing fatigue. While Charlie, Jeremy, and Parker were somewhat unhappy for various reasons, someone was having a great time. This someone was Chief Smith, terribly delighted at the opportunity to have a drink with a beauty. Lucy was not happy to be with him, but she was used to it. They would drink a little more, and then a little more, then she will tell him again that Yanin and Utah are unfair to her, even though she is so kind to them. And then Boss Smith will again contort his face into a grimace of righteous anger. And then she, politely covering her mouth with her hand, will knock back another shot and think about how repulsive this old man is to her. And Charlie at home was thinking that she was lucky to get help from Jeremy. Parker kept calling, clearly unwilling to accept the reluctance to communicate with him. Charlie had to pick up the phone after all. She knew in advance that she wouldn't hear anything pleasant, but she still needed him for now. And then she would change her number. Talking to the guy, at some point out of anger she squeezed the towel. Why should she justify herself for buying Jeremy coffee? The phone flew into the wall. It's impossible to talk to him. Love. Parker swears his love to her, but did he ever really love her? She had people who really treated her well, and this hypocrite was not among them. Yanin's assistant, one of these people, should soon resign. How could this be forgotten? Boss Smith bullied her so severely that she, diligent and patient, could not stand it and submitted her resignation. This cannot be allowed. It seemed that returning home from hard work should have delighted Yanin. The little daughter was running towards her, comically stepping with her little legs, and this really was a ray of light. However, the little husband successfully interrupted this light. He quit his job and now rotted at home without a job. Even changing his daughter's clothes and diapers he didn't want to, only complained and blamed his wife for all the troubles. Having to take responsibility for the child when returning home and continue working overtime simultaneously. As if sensing her mother's mood, the baby cried pitifully. She had to pack her things. Yanina was telling the child a fairy tale about a wonderful life and pure love that she had once dreamed of herself. She herself decided to sleep a little and did not even notice how a trickle of blood flowed from her nose. And the next day at work, the girl was predictably greeted by the screams of her tightly wound boss, Lucy. He rejected her report, showering the girl with insults, although he could not even explain what was wrong with the document. He shouted, and Charlie began to worry. Lucy smiled, however. Her plan was working, and all the guilty were getting what they deserved. Finally, the humiliated Yanin trudged back to her place to redo the report. Charlie couldn't leave her in that state and went after her. Blood was flowing from the girl's nose again, but she was ready to redo the work over and over again for her daughter. And then Charlie suggested what could seem like madness. "Don't redo the report." It was a very risky proposition. Wouldn't Boss Smith notice if she only changed the cover and font? But Charlie was ready to take full responsibility. She was dead. Could anything be worse? In addition, the girl handed her friend a dictaphone so that every vile insult from Smith would be recorded. And he doesn't even do his job, he only shouts and shifts responsibility onto others. Here stands Yuta, bent over, enduring another stream of insults. A little more, and she will be transferred to another department away from this senseless humiliation. It was also representative that the boss, Smith, behaved in this way only when Jeremy was not around. Looking at him, Charlie couldn't wait for him to leave instead of her new friends. And what happened a couple of days later? "Oh!" Boss Smith yelled at Yanin again for allegedly incorrectly drafting the work plan. And the next day, again. And another day later, again, and then again and again, and each time his mouth opened wider and wider, and being near him became more and more disgusting. Only a week later, the plan, in which in reality only the cover and font were changed, was adopted. At that moment, Yanina realized that she could trust her friend and her ideas. And Charlie herself had a plan, and she was going to put it into action. It was just a matter of pulling off a small scheme with the originals and unsigned copies. It was time to start, right now. Just when she handed in the duplicate she needed, Yuta brought a lot of coffee. Smith, the boss, did not fail to raise his voice at her for drinking on the job, and in general, where did she get the money for so many mugs? Jeremy, who had appeared, hurried to notify it was he who had given his card and asked the girl to order delivery. The whole office was shocked. The boss had never given his card to anyone before. Lucy frowned with annoyance. Why Yuta and not her? Why such attention? However, the meeting turned out to be much more important than coffee. Reviewing the report, Jeremy noticed that the pages were mixed up. It turned out to be an old copy. Chief Smith was alarmed and hurried to give him another new copy of the document, hastily scolding his negligent employees. He had to hastily come up with reasons why he rejected other options, and tell how his employees were to blame for everything. However, the papers turned out to be identical. At that moment, Charlie stood up to announce it was she who had handed over the wrong copy, and she apologized for it. Department head Smith at that moment took a deep breath to start telling Jeremy how he would punish the negligent employee. Yes, it's all her fault, her and only her. How can he be blamed for anything? Yes, it's possible. Jeremy made it clear that he is primarily responsible for the department employees and the papers sent to the management. The old man shrank. It seemed he even diminished in size. The head of the department, Smith, will have to redo everything himself within a day. Yanin and Charlie exchanged glances. There it was, karma. Smith and Lucy did not look at each other, but they also shared a common feeling of disappointment. After the meeting, Lucy did not fail to remind Charlie about the meeting scheduled for the 4th. Of course, she remembered. She would never, ever be able to forget that meeting. This was one of the most difficult memories from her past life. Then she thought she was going to meet Lucy, but she came to the alumni reunion. She was not expected there. Not a single soul was glad to see her. Only Lucy habitually pretended to be happy and dragged her to the table. On that very day in the restroom, she accidentally overheard a conversation between her former classmates. They discussed how they sympathized with Lucy, who had the useless Charlie attached to her, and how they themselves would never befriend her. No, the girl had no illusions about how she was treated, but hearing it put so bluntly was terribly painful. When she came out of the restroom, everyone had already left the cafe, even Lucy, whom she had trusted back then. She met only one very unexpected young man who had once meant a lot in her life. The girl was pulled out of her reverie by Yuta's voice. She invited her to go shopping, but Charlie had a meeting that day. However, there was time until morning. Why not go? Satisfied, Yuta began to apply lipstick to her lips. Really? Yes, exactly such a tube was lying in Jeremy's car. These two are a couple? They are hiding their relationship so that rumors don't spread around the company? But they are so different, like fire and ice. Maybe that's what brought them together? As soon as I remembered the sun, a ray of it appeared. It was Jeremy asking if they were leaving. Yuta just snorted that it was none of his business and hurried to drag Charlie away. Well, what advantages these relationships give her? Jeremy had only to heave a heavy sigh. On the day of the alumni reunion, Charlie finally decided to try lenses from a famous company instead of her glasses. Her face, not covered by a black frame, was amazingly beautiful. She had barely mentioned that Jeremy was quite handsome, even without glasses, when Yuta recoiled as if struck by lightning. Didn't she like hearing compliments about her boyfriend? In the salon where the girls entered, the makeup artist gave Charlie a professional look and determined the scope of work. Hair curled on rollers, makeup settled on the face, the hairdryer buzzed. And here's Yuta squeaking with delight again, while the master, satisfied with her work, theatrically wipes the sweat from her brow. And Charlie is already saying with full confidence on the phone that he will definitely come to the meeting with Lucy. At this meeting, everyone had already gathered, and everyone, of course, remembered the main heroine with an unkind word. No one believed the tales that Charlie had become prettier, but they readily believed that it was only thanks to Lucy that she was accepted for the internship. And there she entered the hall. It seemed that someone had deliberately directed the light at her at that moment. Lucy herself was struck speechless when she saw her friend. Everyone else at the table gasped. They did not expect that. Charlie in her new clothes and with new makeup looked like a model. She sat down at the table, pretending not to have expected to meet this whole crowd here. Lucy hastily corrected her expression and leaned towards the girl in her embrace, praising her diligently. But the changes in appearance did not add friendliness to her classmates. The girls still whispered with disapproving faces. But one of the guys jumped up to Charlie, showing amazing hospitality and asking for his number. This person used to be the main bully in organized harassment. But now he was complimenting the girl and laughing at Lucy's earrings. Ha ha, as if she stole them from her mother. Charlie, they suit you better. But it's not time to relax. It's time to go to the bathroom and finally deal with the hatred of my classmates. Here's the third booth from the left. Charlie remembered these details like her own name. She also remembered how quickly and inexplicably the whole class had come to hate her. Now is the perfect time to find out what Lucy told them. Otherwise, she will never forget this incident. Confidentiality was almost violated by a message from Jeremy. What did he want from her on a day off? But it doesn't matter. Former classmates have already entered the restroom, discussing how she had the audacity to show up, dressed like that. At school, they said, Charlie was a traitor, and now she has the audacity to wear the same earrings as poor Lucy. No, enough sitting and keeping silent. It's high time to go out and find out the whole truth. And the truth turned out to be shocking. When did she interfere with Lucy's relationships? Then she did not dissuade her false friend from confessing to the guy. Lucy slandered him back then. And Hugh then confessed to Charlie. There was no lie or envy. But she had something to say. She assured the girls that there had never been such a thing, and that Lucy should be blamed for the lies and betrayal. She even had material evidence. In her brand new red purse lay a business card. Former classmates rushed to examine her. Yes, it's real, but they're only given to company employees, not interns. Charlie decided to finish off the situation and pointed out that one of the girls' handbags was a fake. She got angry and offended, but that was what was needed. Was it pleasant to be in the place of someone unjustly offended, which she had been for many years at school? Charlie went to the exit. She no longer wants to see them. It's better if they think over her words. Behind the doors, Lucy came running up, as if she had been standing guard, mainly to find out what had been said about her all this time. Charlie remembered Hugh, kind and smiling. One day, after receiving her declaration of love, he changed completely and refused to communicate with her. But today he was late for the alumni meeting and was approaching the cafe just as Charlie was leaving. She almost ran past, wiping away tears of an old grievance. But he recognized her and called out to her. The same sweet as when she loved him, he openly declared that he had been looking for her all this time. By the way, at that moment, Lucy was not feeling warm feelings. She was being asked questions about her classmates' years of lying. Charlie was shocked by Hugh's confession. But why was he looking for her? Why did he want to talk? At that moment, Jeremy, the manager's car, pulled up. A new shock. How does he know where to look? And how did he even find out that she was leaving the meeting? Hesitating for a minute, Charlie made her choice and hurried towards the chief's car. In her back, watching the manager close the door behind her, Hugh shouted for her to check the forum. Of course, this excited Charlie, but at the same time, she was also worried about how the manager found her. It turned out that he had noticed her by chance, and also resolved those work issues that had been bothering her. The girl uttered a sincere thank you filled with warm feelings. What was happening to Lucy at that moment? She found herself pressed against the wall, driven into a corner. They demanded her business card from her. But how did they know that she was just an intern if she had concealed this even from her parents? Former friends were finally convinced that the words about successful employment were a lie, and the only one who told the truth turned out to be Charlie. Lucy was clothed in a new lie, and along with her the veil fell from the old one. Those who realized the full horror of the girl's situation began to accuse her of lying, which led to Charlie being bullied. New attempts to justify themselves were even worse than the old ones. Well, who in such a situation shifts the blame? Lucy screamed desperately that it was them. They were to blame for everything, and she had asked them to stop the bullying. But it was pitiful and useless, and she remained alone on the dirty tile of the toilet, abandoned by old friends. This is what Charlie should have been crying here alone. It was she who should have taken all the blows so that against her background, Lucy could seem like a good girl. And when the liar finally managed to come to her senses and left the restroom, there was no one left in the hall. Everyone had gone. Charlie, at that moment, did not experience any emotional upheaval. Unexpectedly for herself, she fell asleep in the manager's car. She was dreaming a dream in which her classmates, as usual, were throwing all sorts of trash at her. Then Hugh sat down at her desk, smiling as if he really was glad to be next to her. He defended her from the attacks, and after that no one ever threw trash at Charlie again. It was pleasant and unusual for her to receive such attention, and she fell in love with the kind student council president. On Lucy's advice, she then wrote a confession and put it in Hugh's locker. But when he read the letter, she realized what a big mistake it was. The young man got angry and ordered her not to approach him. That day, Charlie realized how miserable and unwanted she was. Crying, she woke up. No, she was no longer at school. She was sitting in the manager's car, covered with his jacket. She overslept there for as long as 3 hours, and all that time he didn't wake her up. In horror and embarrassment at having caused such inconvenience to the manager, she hurried to get out of the car, but he did not let her do so. She was again awaited by Parker in the parking lot. But this seemed a little less important than the manager looming over Charlie, especially considering that at that very moment the guy got into the car and drove away. Suddenly the manager asked a strange question. Does she love Parker? But it was none of his business, and in general, of course, she loves him. After all, they are dating, and could this moment be any more awkward? Finally, Charlie managed to leave the car. Jeremy frowned, dissatisfied with the answer, and no longer held her back. But probably it's not good to quarrel? The girl decided to say that he looks very good without glasses. The manager did not appreciate the compliment, and in response stated that her new blouse looked terrible on her. However, as soon as the door slammed shut, he nervously reached to loosen his tie. She smiled at him. She thinks he's handsome. But why was the girl crying? Was it really because of the guy? He was a notorious womanizer. Jeremy could not calmly watch Parker flirting with Lucy in front of the entire department. The car jerked off sharply and quickly, reflecting the anger of its owner. Charlie was at home, and it was a great chance to check out the old forum. Wow, so many messages, and all of them from Hugh. He was writing to her all these years. At that moment, Charlie received a call. It was Chetta, one of those girls they had been hanging out with in the bathroom a few hours ago. She apologized and said that all their actions were dictated only by blind, stupid faith in Lucy's words, and that now they understand how wrong they were. For the first time in a long while, the tears in Charlie's eyes were tears of happiness. She never thought that any of them would have the courage to call. She did not want to see them, but she forgave them, and they were glad of that. In addition, Hugh was sitting with them. He really wanted to see Charlie. The next day, the office was warmed by an aura of delight surrounding Utah. Ah, how beautiful her friend seemed to her, wearing a new blouse. Jeremy also shone with beauty and a blush of embarrassment. He had replaced his glasses with lenses. They collided, beautiful, like the main characters of a drama. These changes did not escape Parker either. Previously, he had not seen Charlie, who had changed her image, and now he was simply struck down by her new appearance. Leaving behind a disgruntled girlfriend, he hurried to his girlfriend. Lucy could not hide her irritation and left, angrily tapping her heels. Parker paid no attention to this. He showered Charlie with compliments, invited her to cafes, and was jealous of Jeremy. But she refused to go to the cafe with him. She went to meet Hugh. The young man was already waiting for her, holding coffee and a confession of love that had endured through the years. He understood that she had a boyfriend and suggested remaining friends. It turned out that back then, years and years ago, Lucy had substituted a love confession with an offensive letter, but the situation was clarified too late. Hugh became a wonderful person. If not for that lie, who knows, maybe they would already be married. Another young man was waiting for her not far from the house. It was Jeremy again. He had already asked for the second time whether she loved Charlie Parker and what was keeping them together, but the second time it became annoying. She directly told him that it was none of his business. The manager threw at her back that she was avoiding and afraid of her boyfriend, so what kind of love was that? Jeremy cannot see her crying. But Charlie felt anger first and foremost upon hearing this. What did his girlfriend Utah think about such anxiety, huh? The manager's face showed that this statement put him in an awkward position. However, it turned out to be difficult because Utah is his sister. They tried not to publicize this in the company. Jeremy treated her like everyone else. And he didn't have a girlfriend, but there was one person that he liked. When Charlie left, Jeremy had to call his sister and let her know that now one more person knew their secret. Utah was not happy about this, but she was much more concerned that her little brother should be with Charlie, at least so that she would not be with the traitor and cheater Parker. Every day she saw him flirting with Lucy, and she couldn't do anything about it. Charlie, who came home, had no strength for anything except falling onto the bed. She was tormented by thoughts about why, in the past, there were no such people around her as those who surround her now. Let her be a little braver then, a little more attentive to the friends around her, and everything would have been different. But this time, they will get what they deserve. The next day, Charlie delighted Parker with breakfast brought to the office and told how she fell asleep without strength. Their conversation was interrupted by Lucy, as always implausibly cheerful and merry. It turns out that yesterday they were walking together with Parker. But Charlie didn't care. She focused her attention on the guy who was praising her new look and asking her out on a date. Oh, Lucy, you may desperately want to get Parker and do anything for that. In reality, you are just a rat running in a maze specially prepared for you. Another thing is Utah, bright and open. The usual start of the workday was interrupted. Jeremy invited everyone to congratulate Yanin on the successful completion of the project, which had been accepted and was soon to be implemented. Smith, the boss, couldn't even pretend to be happy for the girl, as corporate ethics required. Yanina started working, thinking that perhaps she would be promoted, and then she and her daughter would be able to afford a little more. With her daughter, how could she raise her with such workloads? For the sake of the little one, she is ready for anything. Sometime later, Yanin was talking to Charlie. The subject of the conversation was the need to accept Lucy into the project team. At first it seemed that Charlie was offering this for the sake of promoting his girlfriend at work, but in reality the calculation was different. If Lucy joined them, then the boss, Smith, who favored her, would not interfere with the implementation of the project. The meeting on Miss Yanin's promising new project has begun. Derek from the product manufacturing department presented the beta versions of the product. The others also voiced their roles. Not paying much attention to the meeting, Lucy flirted with Parker. However, her joyful mood shattered into pieces when it turned out that her task would be to interview visitors at the entrance. It seemed to be the most harmless position she could be assigned. But the girl hurried to agree after Yanin's statement that this could contribute to her official employment. It seemed there was nothing more humiliating than standing in this stupid uniform and waving this silly little flag. Nothing, she'll make a comeback. It turned out that the job wasn't that difficult. You could play on your phone while the customers figured out for themselves what to do with the samples. When Lucy was asked if peanuts were present in one of the samples, she didn't even bother to look up and confidently stated that no. In vain, the man who tried the offered product suddenly felt unwell. But Lucy was only irritated by the noise, and in general, they themselves should think about what they put in their mouths. The man turned out to be allergic to peanuts, and a crowd quickly gathered around him as he gasped for breath. What did Lucy do? Of course, she started blaming this person for everything, not taking into account that she herself had given false information a couple of minutes ago. When Parker ran to the scene, he was paler than the walls with anger and horror. If they complain, no, they need to hurry to the hospital and, together with Lucy, apologize for what happened. Ah, how grateful she is to him that she won't have to bear responsibility for her actions alone. And he is only too happy to be her support and mainstay. Of course he won't abandon her so sweet and helpless. After what happened, Parker called Charlie to clarify whether she had warned Lucy that one of the samples contained an allergen. Of course she warned, and of course no one listened to her. In the evening of the same day, Janina was returning home, knowing that a more pleasant atmosphere than usual awaited her there. Her parents helped with their granddaughter today, which means the child was well taken care of, and the kitchen smelled deliciously of food. In such conditions, one could calmly wash, getting rid of the worries of the past day. Although it was impossible to completely detach from them, a conversation with Charlie surfaced in memory. She advised to tell the parents the truth, that Janina is suffocating with debts, that her husband has quit his job and has been sitting at home for a long time, that she has no one to help her with the child. Janina hesitated for a long time, but now it seemed to her that her parents would understand. When she came out of the shower, her husband pounced on her, extremely displeased that she had dared to call her parents to look after their granddaughter. But today, for the first time in a long while, she didn't care at all what he was ranting about. At home with his parents, he cannot raise his voice or lift a hand. And she, after all, she is in her own apartment, for which she pays the bills herself, and if she wants, she can kick him out in no time. Charlie was very pleased to hear that her assurances had proved true, and Janina's life was gradually improving. In the office, she ran into the manager. Well, he was supposed to have left, but for some reason made the long trip to the office. It turned out that his goal was to treat Charlie to coffee and tell her something. Who could have thought that a surprise would await them at the new cafe? Hugh, what is he doing here? A young man opened this coffee shop quite recently to be closer to Charlie, and it just so happened that she went there with Jeremy. Tension hung between these two. Charlie didn't know what to do. This was clearly not the best situation the men could have encountered. They even remembered each other, although this only contributed to friendliness on Hugh's part. In just a couple of minutes, nervously sweating without understanding why it was happening, Charlie explained that it was her former classmate and that she, honest word, didn't know he worked here. Finally, they were able to get down to business. The boss announced that during his absence, Smith would replace him. But he made sure that Miss Janina's project bypassed this old man and was sent directly to higher authorities. After all, everyone knows that they don't get along. How pleasant it was, and Charlie also realized that Mr. Smith's next blunder would likely hit his position, salary, or at worst, his self-esteem. Returning to her workstation, through the glass partition dividing the office, she noticed Utah with the department head. He was laughing in her face while she was clearly displeased. The girl immediately confessed to her friend that the morning was not good. Smith, the boss, wanted her to hand over the project she had been working on for a long time. When he summoned her, she already anticipated something unpleasant. Well, when did he ever call her for something good? The old man brazenly and confidently declared, "She is inexperienced. She cannot handle the international project she is working on. The only correct option is to give the project to him." Yuta was not a timid one and refused, but the boss did not disdain blackmail and openly stated that whether the girl would get the job would depend on his reference. She decided that even under such conditions, she would cope better on her own. Halal products that she works with are a very promising idea. The project is clearly worthy. Despite expectations, Charlie offered Utah to entrust her with the project and hand it over to Mr. Smith. Then she will return the project, but right now it's better to let it go. The management was quite satisfied with the project. The department head chuckled nastily, pleased with how circumstances were unfolding. In his imagination, he became rich and famous, and Lucy married him, even more beautiful from love and happiness. Due to the launch of Mr. Smith's project, Miss Janina's project was suspended. However, Charlie assured her, "If you sit by the river long enough, sooner or later the corpse of your enemy will float by. But he himself will not get there. The appearance of the corpse must be facilitated, and they were on the right path to this. Charlie handed the project report to Mr. Smith. She really hopes it will help him. It will help drown as deep as it is possible to drown someone so unscrupulous. He did not know about such plans of his employees and naively believed that after all his shouts they really wished him good luck. Charlie convinced him that they would become the first pioneers of Halal in Korea. Ah, how happy Mr. Smith was. He could already see how everyone stopped considering him a pesky old man and began to see some authority in him. The management actively encouraged the project, the stock price was rising, bottles of alcohol were consumed at official and unofficial meetings on this occasion. This morning Mr. Smith in his new suit blossomed like a spring cherry and gently promised to buy Lucy strawberry milk. The morning turned out to be fateful, but not in the way the man would have liked. As soon as he opened the door, a folder with papers flew into his face. It turned out that a group of Korean volunteers had been kidnapped by Islamists. Against this backdrop, the stock price was plummeting like a stone into the abyss. Mr. Smith had to urgently get out of the situation, and he suggested shifting all the blame onto Yuta, publishing an article with her apologies. Halal girl. What a loud headline. All the blame will fall on her, and the company will get away with just one victim. He would be sure that this is an excellent plan, but Mr. Smith has already said that this project was approved by the management, and another miscalculation, a new folder flew into his face. A little more, and the doors will fly off their hinges from the loudness of the scream. It is simply impossible to conceal the shame from the team. When Mr. Smith finally managed to break free from captivity, it was pitiful to look at him. The employees shunned him. But the strawberry milk, bought for Lucy, was a symbol of hope for the man. At least the girl would stay with him. Nevertheless, it was enough to offer her a pink bottle, and she refused with an expression of disdain on her face. The entire team whispered, discussing Mr. Smith's failure. The scapegoat was found. Of course, it's all Charlie's fault. It was she who insisted on the press release, and someone has to be to blame. Again, the employees saw a face distorted with anger. But this time he crossed the line. Charlie could tolerate a lot, but an insult to her family. She could not help but respond to Mr. Smith. His last argument was brute force. A second, and he was yanked up by the scruff of the neck like a puppy. This is not when Jeremy returned, just at the moment when it was too late to deny. The boss forced him to apologize, although perhaps such apologies were worth less than a penny. Only after that did Jeremy release the department head, practically throwing him to the floor. The promise to report the incident to the disciplinary department sounded like a clap of thunder. Based on the results of the meeting several days later, Mr. Smith was demoted, lost a significant portion of his salary, and suffered many other losses. It was all the harder to watch how Lucy, previously well-disposed towards him, was now fawning over Parker again. She complained that someone was spreading rumors that she was in a close relationship with Mr. Smith, but that's a lie. Who could have said such a thing? Parker was saying that the department head would probably be fired soon, and they would finally no longer be forced to look at his nasty face right at the moment when a fist flew into his jaw. Mr. Smith shouted that Lucy was his girlfriend. She could not stand such a thing. Despite the girl's attempts to prove that she had nothing to do with him, everyone in the office had already drawn their own conclusions. Humiliated, she flew out of the room. On the other hand, since this investment didn't pay off, you can always redirect your attention to another boss. Jeremy soon reported that Mr. Smith was temporarily suspended from work, and the department handled the work perfectly well during his absence. The Halal project was handed over to Yuta and suspended. Yanin's project was restored and launched again. Derek was transferred to their department to replace Mr. Smith. Strange, but Lucy visually did not show her upset in any way. What will she do? The changes were very pleasant, and the department became full of enthusiasm. Lucy's attention was redirected to Jeremy. She firmly decided that there was nothing easier than making a man fall in love with her, and she was fully prepared for it. Yuta, after the meeting, approached Charlie, surprised at how she predicted that it was better not to touch the project, but she referred to the news about the Taliban. From her past life, she remembered that the stock crash and investments in stabilizing the situation caused Parker's great displeasure. They were sitting in Hugh's cafe, and a cheerful guy brought them some new dessert. Yuta tried to refuse more gently since she didn't like sweets. But the smiling Hugh persuaded her to take a bite, and how right he was. Oh yes, it was deliciously delicious. Hugh was confident in his baking, but praise from a skeptically inclined customer was even more valuable. Left alone, Lucy kept trying to understand what Charlie's motives were. Why did she start communicating with Yuta? The better, on the other hand, here they are, the two of them with Jeremy, what an opportunity. She hurried to take advantage of it and offer the boss to have coffee together. He said that he would prefer juice. She immediately declared that she also always chooses juice, that it's better than coffee. And then the glass slipped out of Lucy's hand. She hurried to gather the shards, but the very first touch left a scratch on her finger. She whined pitifully that it hurt her very much. Despite expectations, Jeremy simply advised using a bandage and left. Lastly, he reminded about the need to clean up the puddle. Who did not stay aside was Parker, who ran up to the girl as quickly as if she were badly injured. She asked him, her savior, to blow on the little wound. Parker was overwhelmed by a wave of heat. How sweet she is. If he had seen Jeremy's contemptuous look, he would probably have tried to hide the pleasure on his face. Charlie caught the boss's eye. How he wished he could tell her all this, but he was too afraid of hurting her. But he didn't start a conversation about that, but about Hugh's cafe. Yuta promised to stay away from it, but the pastries. As soon as the opportunity arose, little sister ran away out of sight. A little nervously, Jeremy blocked Charlie's way. All he wanted was to invite her to dinner, and also to shield her from the sight of Parker fluttering around Lucy. His expression was too agitated for the pretext he had invented for discussing Mr. Smith. He was worried about her, really very worried. And there they are, sitting in an expensive restaurant. Isn't this too much for a simple discussion of an old man? Instead, Jeremy decided to ask about Parker again. Again, they lied to him that everything was fine. Finally, he was forced to promise not to touch on this topic again. When they were leaving the restaurant, Charlie thought that her legs were terribly tired, and she wouldn't survive even another hour of walking. This thought was prophetic. The heel of the shoe broke. Charlie lost her balance and fell. Jeremy didn't have time to catch her. He found himself only able to rush to her, asking if everything was all right. When Charlie finally got to her feet, she sighed dejectedly that she had recently repaired these shoes, and now they were broken again. He had no choice but to scoop her up in his arms. The girl did not expect this, and did not expect it to be so pleasant. Finally, she was seated on one of the sofas and had a chance to catch her breath. After some time, Jeremy returned, laden with a package and a first aid kit. He borrowed a first aid kit from the staff and was ready to provide first aid to the girl. Besides, she no longer had to worry about shoes. He bought her new ones. Jeremy put the boat shoes on Charlie's feet and assured her that she deserved the very best. At that moment, the ringing phone was left unattended. Parker in his car at that moment was stewing in a less romantic atmosphere. He was burning with hatred. He noted perfectly well that Jeremy was too often near Charlie. He also saw clearly the interest that the charmer Hugh showed in her. Yes, she had become prettier and was even called the hardest working and most beautiful girl in the department, but that didn't mean she could leave him. Finally, she answered his call. Parker called to remind her about tomorrow's date. He was constantly thinking about her now, but it all started as a joke. Then, out of boredom, he made a bet with his friends that he would make the new dragonfly-like employee fall in love with him. He met her, asked for her number. They had dinner, and it turned out that Charlie was a rather interesting conversationalist. And she was also very kind. She did his work for him when he cheated on her in clubs and bars. But now everything had changed. Looking at the rising stocks, he thought about being able to provide them with a good future. They were soon sailing on a yacht rented just for the two of them. Beautiful like a doll, Charlie stood with a huge bouquet, and fireworks exploded behind her back. The girl was wearing shoes bought by Jeremy, but she accepted Parker's marriage proposal. She was receiving, and hugging him, she watched the news about the fall in stocks that the guy had recently invested in. The next day, she was already telling about the engagement at the office. Everyone was smiling, but in reality, for various reasons, no one was really happy about the wedding at all. In particular, Lucy could not even believe this news. She shuddered with anger and jealousy, looking at the expensive ring and listening to Charlie praising Parker's kindness and sincerity. It was at least offensive. No, she still won't give up Parker. All of Charlie's hopes will go down the drain. Until Parker finally also received the news about the fall in the company's stock, in which he had invested everything he could. This friend! How could he lie so brazenly, making him invest in an unprofitable company? What to do? If it goes on like this, he won't have a penny left. But that's not what should be discussed with Charlie. It's better to take her away. But is it possible that she did not notice the discarded newspaper with the depressing news? As usual, the whole team went to a restaurant. Yuta took on the work with meat. Lucy did not fail to comment that, in her opinion, Yuta would be perfectly suited for a waiter's job. One wonders if Lucy herself has succeeded in anything. On the threads of hostility stretched between them, one could string beads. Jeremy did not listen to the quarrels. He was thinking about something of his own. It turned out, about his sister's message that since Charlie had already received a marriage proposal, he should hurry up. When looking at the girl, he was thinking only about whether he could save her from this mistake. Finally, there were 3 of them left. It was the most suitable time to carry out her plan. Of course, Parker was happy to sit practically hugging Lucy, but Charlie still took her away in a taxi. The girl seated her friend in the car, continuing to praise Parker. At some point, she referred to the fact that she had forgotten things at the restaurant and allowed Parker, who had approached, to stay alone with her. Lucy hurried to show how cold she was and how she needed the warmth of her boyfriend. Her hints were too clear and understandable. The kiss was inevitable. Their lips met and betrayal was inevitable. But Parker did not want to avoid her. This was exactly what he wanted from sweet Lucy. Charlie stood watching as in this life, too, her boyfriend and her friend betrayed her together. It happened again. She could not hold back her tears probably because hope dies last. But in fact, it should have been a reason for joy. Or at least an excuse to get drunk. These two are well matched. Well, no need to be sad. Charlie kept refilling her shot glass over and over, not thinking that someone would stop her from doing so. But the manager was right there again. He took the bottle from her. She offered him to stay, and he offered her cooperation. He offered the sweetest thing. Why wouldn't she turn to him every time she needed help, or someone who could listen? Why not? Besides, right now she had the opportunity to lean on his broad back and enjoy the moment of slight intoxication. Parker's morning began with a headache and the gradual realization that he was not alone in bed. But he's practically married. We can't let anyone find out about this. That's exactly what he said to Lucy, whose eyes immediately welled up with tears. She agreed to keep quiet, but only if he would date her. Oh yes, that was the perfect option. Who in their right mind would refuse? This was not the most opportune moment for Charlie's call, but he could not hang up. His fiancée was sitting in the beauty salon and asking to make her makeup. Unforgettable. Her mother-in-law had to be delighted at least this time. Then, in her past life, she constantly humiliated Charlie and regularly reminded her that she had been accepted into the family only as an obedient servant for her little son. Parker had already run off to meet his parents, and Lucy nervously chewed her nails. Was he going to dump her? She will be with him. After all, she slept with Charlie's guy right before meeting the parents. The family gathered at a table in the restaurant and was only waiting for Charlie. When she entered, Parker's parents were struck dumb. It was amusing how the parents emphasized the modesty of Charlie mentioned by Parker, hinting at her revealing outfit. And at that moment she remembered how in her past life she constantly felt guilty towards this woman. This did not prevent Charlie from telling how diligently she took care of the health of her future husband. And also, how will they come to visit on weekdays since she will get married and quit her job? The mother-in-law was in such a shock. Parker's father finally put in his word. She must get married, give birth to a son, and keep her opinion to herself. Charlie wouldn't stand for that. Her body, her business, and there's nothing wrong with having a baby girl. In the end, what does "her father is to blame for her being born a girl" mean? The girl contemptuously called her mother-in-law an auntie, not trying to hide behind decencies. She stopped trying to please them. She should have stopped in her previous life. Now it's time to leave. And yes, there will be no wedding. Parker felt his heart sink. How could it not be? The mother-in-law seemed close to fainting, but her little son was more preoccupied with the departing bride. But she doesn't care. Let them figure it out themselves. She will not allow old mistakes, not again. Leaving the restaurant, Charlie saw Lucy getting out of a taxi. Well, she was right on time and in the right place. Parker was now persuading his mother to accept his choice, although the woman was not giving in. Lucy found herself in the midst of a heated argument. "She didn't hear the scandal? We can't allow family dramas to become public." The girl gladly accepted the invitation to sit at the table, although Parker's face showed that he was not happy about it. This was precisely what she had come for. Charlie stared at the screen of her phone, where one after another flashed messages from her anxious fiancé. So everything was ready. These two came together. She could leave the hateful place of work, leaving behind the ashes of her past life. But let the resignation letter lie for another minute. For now, Yanin and Yuta are calling her to have coffee. How can one refuse here? Moreover, the manager gives her his card for payment. And not just gives, but offers to have a bite of something delicious. And Parker woke up with Lucy again. For some reason, she thought that they would now be together, but where did she get that idea from? They are not a couple. He still plans to marry Charlie. Lucy will be his mistress no more. And this scoundrel left, not even understanding how unpleasant the destruction of old plans is. Charlie learned that morning that Lucy had asked for Tom's number, one of those who had hit on the girl at that alumni meeting. It seems that the time has come to remind Jeremy about the agreement. The manager was happy to be approached and, of course, was ready to help with all his might, and so she decided to ask for help. So Charlie was returning home from work. The streetlights were on, but it still didn't give a sense of security. In this very frightening semi-darkness, she was called out to. It was Tom, and fortunately he seemed quite friendly. At that moment, they were not alone. Parker was sitting in a car parked nearby, gripping the steering wheel with terrible malice. He couldn't believe it. She was ignoring his calls. She didn't care about his desire to meet. And she was casually meeting with some strange guy? Lucy knocked on the window here. She got into the car and began methodically tearing off the rose petals that Parker had planned to give to Charlie. It was incredibly unpleasant to hear that his girlfriend, it turns out, often meets with this former classmate of hers, as well as with Hugh. A friend claimed Charlie's mother found a lover and ran away, and her daughter is a reflection of her mother, no more and no less. For Parker, this was news, and quite unpleasant. He was afraid that the same thing would happen to him. It was a great chance for Lucy to suggest he leave and have fun, forgetting about the traitor. At that moment, Charlie was explaining to Tom that it wasn't her who had invited him, and that it wasn't her fault that he had ended up here. But her former classmate did not believe her, and certainly did not want to leave. Was she thinking of mocking him? Looking down on him? No, Tom was not going to leave just like that. If she didn't want to go with him voluntarily, well, he would help her make the right decision. However, Charlie was under protection. Before the guy could drag her away, he was twisted into a pretzel. Of course, it was Jeremy. Moreover, he introduced himself as Charlie's boyfriend. And it was a big mistake to call this guy an ugly freak and demand that he take his hands off. He cleared it away. What difference did it make that after that, Tom found himself on the ground and whined that he had almost dislocated his shoulder? Jeremy didn't care. He was taking Charlie away, leaving all the new stress behind. She thanked him for the cooperation until she realized that they had arrived at a hotel. And Jeremy didn't even deny it. How to understand this was completely unclear. However, the explanation came literally a second later. Tom knows where she lives. And also, the guy can't help but give his girlfriend a ride at least to the hotel. Charlie said something here that it was unclear which of them was more embarrassed. She said that, in that case, it would also be strange to leave the girl alone in the hotel, but it looked like a rather indecent hint, and she didn't mean that at all. In general, in the end, they decided to move in together, although it was terribly awkward. She also let slip that they needed one room, not two. He was a little embarrassed. How sweet she fluttered in her words, and how pleasant the thought would be to him that they lived in the same room. Their rooms were still next to each other, and the farewell seemed calm and peaceful. However, inside Charlie's soul there was complete chaos. She thought she had behaved like a complete fool, and she didn't understand what had come over her today. Jeremy was not tormented by such thoughts. He was already solving the issues of the girl's safety. His people dealt with Tom, got information about Parker. Now Jeremy also knew that Lucy was with him at that moment. He realized that it was she who had arranged that meeting by writing to her classmate about wanting to meet up. He also realized that this was why Charlie had asked him to pretend to be her boyfriend. He had only to remember the girl for the realization to strike his heart like lightning. He had not brought her dinner. When Jeremy came to her room, she met him in a bathrobe and with a towel on her head. She had just come out of the shower. It was an incredibly cute and homely sight. That's why the director was embarrassed to ask what she wanted to eat. Charlie hadn't even finished saying how much she loved pork soup when a tiny moth appeared on her towel. Who would have thought that she was so afraid of them and that Jeremy would have to save her from a butterfly? In an attempt to deal with this terrible and horrible danger, she slipped on a puddle of water that had dripped from her hair. The only thing to grab onto turned out to be Jeremy's tie, which happened to be nearby, and there they both are on the floor in a terribly awkward but surprisingly pleasant situation. The room was enveloped in silence. They could hear their hearts beating. The semi-darkness separating them could be touched. Charlie lay in bed, embarrassed and not understanding why her heart was beating so hard. Dinner wasn't working out right now. In the next room, Jeremy was also lying down. Only he perfectly understood why this incident turned out to be so exciting. Separated only by the thin hotel wall, that night they understood each other like no one else. All night long, Charlie did not get a wink of sleep, so in the morning she was very sleepy. Jeremy, of course, too. These were two sweet, sleep-deprived zombies, each of whom thought that at least their neighbor had slept normally. He invited her to breakfast. He took care of it so early, claiming that it was not proper for a guy to leave a girl hungry. The director was joking, but he found it amusing to watch the girl get embarrassed. The blow below the belt was delivered quickly and unexpectedly. Charlie said that he looks like a dog when he smiles. The girl had to explain quickly. A big, smart, obedient Labrador puppy is meant. Intelligent and charming. I blurted out an embarrassing stupidity again, and he didn't fail to point it out. But he also helped to end this awkward moment by talking about the move. It turned out that Yuta had already found a good apartment for Charlie. A little later, they went to see it. The friend was very proud of the premises where she had lived before and praised the apartment with all her might. Charlie was very grateful for such help. She clearly understood that she needed to move out as soon as possible. It turned out that the landlord is a good person, the utility bills are low, and the side is south-facing, which means there will be plenty of sunshine. Right away, they went to sign the contract, discussing on the way that it would be better not to tell anyone in the office about the move. During the conversation, it also turned out that Charlie and Jeremy went to the same university, although the girl thought they had never crossed paths. That same evening, Parker kept trying to break into the apartment where his fiancée used to live. But a male voice answered the intercom, and the guy started shouting, demanding that the door be opened for the one he identified as the lover. But it would have been better if the door had not opened. Behind it stood a hulk, twice as wide as Parker. The desire to make a scandal immediately disappeared, and the young man bowed, expressing sincere regret for his intrusion. As soon as he tried to find out where the girl who had lived here before had gone, the door slammed shut, separating Parker from the truth, but also from a broken nose. It was not difficult to understand that Charlie had run away without telling him, and of course he started calling her, claiming that he forgave her rudeness towards his mother, and her betrayal, and forgave everything in general, if it would make her talk to him. How timely she had moved. Frustration was interrupted by a knock at the door. It was Jeremy bringing her pork soup. His legs were rubbed by a cat that at first glance seemed well-groomed and domestic. Jeremy quickly lost priority. All attention was drawn to Pani, who turned out to be his pet. He quickly managed to pull him back. It turned out that Jeremy lives in the neighboring apartment. He was embarrassed that he had not said it in advance, and he was worried that the girl would get angry. She seemed to be terribly surprised. He hoped that would be the end of it, but alas. A shocked scream shook the residential complex. Previously, Yuta lived here, and in fact, this was the reason why he settled nearby, to help, support, and slightly control. The question was resolved, and attention turned again to the food they had brought with them. The most tender farewell, like the greeting, once again fell to Pani. But there was no parting after the farewell. First, Jeremy suggested taking the cat for a while, and then somehow it turned out that he was also invited to come in for a while. And there they sat together, content with their presence, and only the cat suffered from the active stroking and strong smell of soup. This was not just a simple food delivery. This was food in dishes bought out from a restaurant, deliciously fragrant and clearly not cheap. Charlie was surprised and touched by this gesture, although hunger did not allow her to fully experience these emotions. In addition, the taste of the soup was exactly as she remembered it. It seemed that her father had prepared the dish that very morning, awaiting her return from school, although in reality Jeremy simply made his innocent sister go to the girl's hometown for this dish. It was even more pleasant to receive an invitation to come to the director's home whenever I wanted, to play with Pani. If the guy didn't burn up from happiness and embarrassment, it was only because he didn't want to disgrace himself in front of the girl. Returning to his apartment, Jeremy fed and praised the cat. He was happy to have the opportunity to invite Charlie over and thanked the cat for leaving the house on time. The next day they had to get back to work, so Yanin and Charlie were heading to the store where the products manufactured as part of the new project were supposed to be put on sale. But strangely, the shelves were completely empty. It was enough just to approach the employee to ask why this happened, as he hurried to contact the management. Strange, but he did not want to see them in the shopping area. Lucy had no inkling of the impending troubles. However, Charlie and Yanin burst into the office, seething with anger and determined to confront the culprit. It turned out that no one in the office even knew about the incident that resulted in a man with a peanut allergy ending up in the hospital. Moreover, it turned out that Lucy didn't even apologize to the store for the scandal she caused. Jeremy came out to the noise, who also did not know what had happened. The girl shrank, trying to understand what to do and how to absolve herself of guilt. The best solution turned out to be, of course, to burst into tears and try to present oneself as a white sheep who did not report the problem solely in order not to set up Charlie. She claimed that she was not informed about allergens in the product samples. Thus, Charlie was made the culprit. Very quickly it became apparent that everyone was ready to support the one who cries. Lucy rushed forward. She would take all the blame for her friend, yes. And Charlie herself claimed that she didn't remember anything, although she was very sorry. But why not check the cameras, which definitely remember everything? Lucy did not expect this at all. What should she do about it? And there's no chance that the recordings weren't saved. Charlie had a flash drive with the relevant recordings in his hands. Here are the shots of Lucy receiving the briefing, not paying any attention to it. Here is the confirmation that the sample does not contain peanuts. Here is the footage of the scandal. The guilt was unambiguously proven. Moreover, Parker, who should have also reported the incident, was drowning along with Lucy. What to do? Oh yes, there's a foolproof option. Burst into tears, and also shift all the blame onto someone else. Parker was stunned and angry. He did not expect such a setup. I had to apologize, saying that he wanted to sort everything out without causing a fuss because Lucy was brand new. The quarrel continued on the roof. No, but what else could she do? She really needed that staff position. The blame had to fall on someone else. However, Parker had worked at the company longer and stated that in such a situation, not only a full-time position but even a contract extension should not be expected. Lucy realized she was dragged into a situation even though they weren't even going to give her a promotion. This became the reason to make a small call, a call to that very victim on behalf of the company, a promise to give a gift. And then, to get a call back from an enraged man. How could they think of sending him a whole package of salads with peanuts? But Lucy doesn't care. Let him come to the company's main office and find Miss Yanin. The project manager, Yuta, and Charlie had just arrived at the office, discussing the upcoming day and their work burdens. However, they could not even pass through the turnstiles peacefully. A scream rang out at the entrance, and all the employees were instantly alarmed. The same man who had recently been fed peanuts burst into the room. He threw a box on the floor from which containers fell out with the same salad that had sent him to the hospital. Yanina hurried to get involved in the situation and tried to talk to the dissatisfied client. The man, upon hearing her name, became even more enraged, for it was this very name that Lucy had introduced herself with over the phone. In addition, in the sender field on the box, it was her. Charlie quickly realized that Lucy had done all this. This also made her understand that the girl did not plan to stay with the company. Yanin's attempt to resolve the issue peacefully did not seem successful. The man instantly resorted to raising his hand against her, thinking that she did not even want to apologize. He did not take into account that Charlie was nearby, whose memory stored the episode that led to her death. The girl decided she would no longer remain silent and stand aside. Yanine is her friend, and she won't let some disgruntled client hit her. It was just in time. I had to explain that the parcel was sent by another girl, and also promise that as soon as this girl is found, she will be delivered to the hospital and gets down on her knees. We also had to guarantee compensation. The man seemed to slowly calm down, although the scandal had not yet subsided. At that moment, Jeremy intervened. He also understood who was to blame for what happened, but invited the dissatisfied client to his office to discuss everything in a more private setting. Charlie thought that, although Lucy no longer planned to show up for work, she would make her take responsibility for her actions. This situation was observed from the side by an expensively dressed man. He was even somewhat displeased that Jeremy had intervened in the conflict, because the employees had almost resolved it themselves. Here's who really knew what he was doing. He was the chairman of the company. Lucy that day was sitting in the beauty salon and enjoying the silence and tranquility until the moment when a message came to her phone. This was written by her mother, the very woman who always vented her anger on her, was always dissatisfied with her. But let her write what she wants. Lucy will always live like a queen. Right after the message there was a call. Hugh was calling, for some reason asking about Charlie and her boyfriend. They arranged to meet at a small cafe. Lucy couldn't resist the pleasure of discussing her friend behind her back. However, in the cafe she found something completely different from what she had expected. At the table sat Charlie herself, who clearly had something to talk about. She immediately poured the alcohol into the glasses, telling that she had to resort to Hugh's help, since Lucy herself did not appear at the office. The girl immediately began to justify herself. It's all because it's very difficult for her there. And in general, she is friends only with Charlie, and she is constantly socializing with others and doesn't pay any attention to her at all. But her only friend was not at all in the mood to fool around. She handed Lucy an envelope with a notice of dismissal due to absenteeism and unauthorized leaving of work. Although the girl expected that she was no longer welcome at work, she still did not believe that the situation was unfolding in this way. She hoped that her contract would not be renewed, but certainly not for such a sudden dismissal. She immediately began denying the accusations that she had sent the client an offensive package. Was her name written on the box? But Charlie had an ace up her sleeve. She said that she rushed to Lucy only because she was worried about her, since it was from her number that calls were made to that very victim. It was impossible to deny it any longer. I had to hurry and come up with a new lie, that she had indeed sent a parcel under the name Miss Yanin, but there was definitely no peanuts in it. Apparently, something got mixed up at the post office. Charlie stated that the best thing would still be to apologize to the client, and a few minutes later she was already forcing Lucy to kneel in front of the hospital bed. With difficulty, but the girl still agreed. Exactly until the moment when she could not restrain herself again, and began to declare that, in general, she was not the only one who shouted, and the man should also apologize. Parker and Jeremy arrived. Neither of them even looked at Lucy, let alone rushed to help her. What else could she do? Only cry again and announce that she is pregnant. Parker's heart was pierced by panic. Pregnant? Could it be from him? But Lucy was the last thing on his mind. That same evening, he called not her, but Charlie. Surprisingly, the girl picked up the phone and even quite peacefully agreed to talk, since she had time. Although she agreed only to inform, she doesn't care whether it's his child and whether Lucy is telling the truth. She doesn't intend to discuss anything with them other than work anymore. Parker's request was not to spread the word that he had cheated on her, as such rumors would cause problems for her, too. It didn't matter to her. It wasn't her fiancé who cheated on her, but her ex-fiancé, and she didn't give a damn about the rumors. She slammed down the receiver and thought that even in such a situation, this scoundrel was worried only about his reputation. And Parker was indeed shaking. He smoked cigarette after cigarette when he called Lucy. However, he was prevented from properly yelling at her by his mother. She took the phone from the girl and said that they were already in full preparation for the wedding. Besides, she offered Lucy to live with Parker since she is expecting a baby. Very pleased, she went shopping with her future mother-in-law and remembered how she told Charlie that it was all true and that the child's father was her former fiancé. Then she pretended to be very sorry and that they still had to remain best friends. Charlie couldn't say anything. She simply didn't understand how it all turned out this way, so she just left to digest this news alone. Lucy's pitiful whining as she left turned into laughter. Ah, how pitiful this successful beauty looks, unable to string a couple of words together. She had nothing left, nothing. She is pitiful, useless, she is abandoned by everyone. Now only Lucy is with her. Oh yes, finally justice has triumphed. Yes, and at home with her mother-in-law it seemed pleasant to be there. She was fed and urged to eat more, with new plates being brought to the table. She ate such a delicious homemade soup and such juicy meat for the first time in her life. But then a new dish entered the game: carp juice. He was terribly stinky, disgusting, and certainly did not whet the appetite, but the mother-in-law insisted, "You need to drink it, the child will be healthier." I had to hold my nose and drink, and even try not to vomit, otherwise I would have had to drink again. This unpleasant thing was compounded by another unpleasant one. The courier brought a box of wedding invitations. But the mother-in-law chose the invitations without consulting anyone, and Lucy found them simply ugly. Why is she interfering in their affairs? Who asked her to do that? It's Parker's wedding, not his mother's. In addition, it turned out that the mother-in-law had also bought a hanbok for Lucy. What a good mother-in-law, how she tries so that the newlyweds are not burdened. The attempt to object was harshly cut off. The precious son is already gone all day at work. Why should he also run around stores on weekends? If the bride-to-be behaves like this, there will be no wedding. By evening, Parker arrived. The meeting with his future wife clearly did not inspire any enthusiasm in him. Lucy, however, was greatly enthused by the money. Her father gave her a card with a decent sum of money for housing as a wedding gift. If she had known that he would squander the money she had begged from her father on stocks, she would hardly have thrown herself around his neck. Charlie also returned home that evening. She ran into Jeremy. It turned out he was taking the cat to the hospital. But fortunately, she is fine. It was just a routine checkup. Charlie asked to hug the cat goodbye, but instead received the password to Jeremy's apartment and the right to enter whenever she wanted to chat with Panny. Besides, the director offered to take the kitten home with him tonight. She loves Charlie too, why not? Lying in bed, the girl remembered that in her past life she also had a cat, just as small and beautiful, but someone took it away. She also, having received a message from Lucy, remembered how in a past life they were handing out wedding invitations. Charlie herself then froze in excitement, and Parker had to hand them out. Today she agreed to come and even promised to book a table at the restaurant. They're getting married. Well, that's wonderful. Her fate of a hard life with Parker is passing her by, and that's the main thing. And what are these funny promises to eat everything that will be on the table, since a child will come with her too? Lucy doesn't know this yet, but in fact Parker can't have children. So, they met the next day. The poor bride was not even allowed to wear her favorite skirt. They dressed her in an ugly dress of strange colors. And it would all be fine if Charlie saw it, but suddenly the whole office appeared in front of Lucy. And at the same time, none of those present was glad to see her and was surprised by her arrival. Utah even jumped up from her seat to indignantly ask what she was doing here at all. But then Charlie appeared, and with the most polite look, announced that the girl had good news, and it was for this very reason that they had all gathered here. Poor Lucy had to sit on the edge of the table, feeling the unfriendly atmosphere around her with her whole body. Parker even suggested that she should not disgrace herself, but quickly escape through the toilet exit. But she could not and did not want to do so. Instead, she decided to go all in and inform all employees. She was getting married. Each of those present was in shock. Getting married? Surely not to Boss Smith. No, she smiled as if doing something for the good of all, and announced, her fiancé is Parker. The news struck everyone like a thunderbolt. Not only did she come uninvited, but she also joyfully announced that she was getting married to a man who had only recently left poor Charlie. And only Charlie herself was calm and congratulated the newlyweds, for this was exactly what she wanted to achieve. Lucy accepted the insincere, forced-through-the-teeth congratulations with an air as if she did not notice any falsity. Before the evil Parker led her away, she handed Charlie an invitation and informed him that she would be the one to catch the bride's bouquet. Lucy was surprised and displeased. What kind of calm face was that? Why was there not a shadow of displeasure on it? But who did not fail to express dissatisfaction was Parker. In the car, he thundered down on the girl and her actions. She had to convince him that she did not want such a turn of events at all, that her plan was only to give the invitation to Charlie and nothing more. But the justification did not play the role that was assigned to it. Parker only got angrier. How could she do that to a girl without whom he cannot live? He was angry and upset. No, he could not allow anyone to treat Charlie like that. Lucy understood that everything was going wrong. She had tried so hard to escape the ghost of her mother, screaming that she was stupid and useless, and here it was again? I had to apologize. No, she got out of the house with such difficulty, she would never, ever go back there. Charlie was also getting ready to go home. The main thing she had come for was already done. As soon as she left, the public quickly explained to the new employee why such tense silence hung in the office with Lucy's appearance. Charlie left and Jeremy followed him. And how would he have stayed? After all, he had to give the girl a ride home. It was very fortunate that he refused to drink. He said, apparently now he would have to take Pani with him. He had to somehow console the girl. And the cat loves her very much. Why not? Charlie thought, since he's so kind, why not ask him for a favor, just like last time? Soon the wedding day arrived. It began with the mother-in-law forbidding Liusi to wear too bright makeup, as it could be harmful for the baby. Beautiful photographs were not important to this woman. All that concerned her were the descendants of their family. What was happening did not please Lucy. She disliked the disfiguring dress with a silly collar, disliked the invitations, disliked the pale makeup, but she could do nothing about it. Even her friends didn't come, Parker told his friend. She simply has no friends, no one to come. It was not fun to greet the guests, but it did not seem like a shock either, until Charlie appeared at the doorstep. She was incredibly beautiful. It seemed that the air around her sparkled, and the handsome hunk Jeremy next to her didn't make a bad impression either. The director said that he came on behalf of the entire management team, and friends hurried to Parker to ask who the beautiful girl next to him was. One of them flew off to meet her, not noticing Jeremy's disgruntled face. But as soon as he heard the girl's name, he realized this was the very girl Parker called a country bumpkin. What was he whining about that she had gotten on his nerves, and his boss was an obnoxious nerd in glasses? It was an obvious lie. At that moment, Parker realized with absolute clarity what exactly he had lost. Charlie went to visit Lucy. She was sitting alone in the room, staring at the floor, sad and unwanted by anyone. The bride put on a joyful expression, but in reality she was displeased. Why had she dressed up so much? She was just a guest. Charlie praised her beauty, but thought that once she had worn that ugly dress chosen by her mother-in-law, then Lucy was the one who caught the bouquet. I wonder what she felt. At the entrance to the hall, Charlie met Hugh. The couple had asked him to come for support. Although it seemed there was no need for that, Jeremy was already prowling around the girl, resembling a menacing dog. It turned out that Chetta and her friends would also come to the wedding. All of them, except for Charlie, gave the minimum amount just to get into the wedding. She's not coming just like that. Of course, Hugh told her who the groom is at this wedding and how he treated their mutual friend. Charlie understood they were definitely up to something. And immediately there was a chance to understand what exactly. The girls entered the hall. They sparkled with glasses, struck with bold necklines, shocked with bare legs. Dressed completely in a club style, bright and daring, Chetta and her friends literally burst into this room. Although dressed too brightly for an official event, they admired Charlie's appearance and told her not to pay attention to them, but simply enjoy the delicious food. The ceremony began. Once these people were the closest to her, but now she had distanced herself from them as much as she could and did not regret it at all. Lucy was still happy about the wedding. Parker tolerated her. They both deserved it. When it was time to take pictures, Chetta and her friends hurried into the frame, claiming that they and Lucy were friends until the grave. In Korean, the expression, friend's testicles, crude and inappropriate in such a situation. The photographer even thought he had misheard, but the girls did not fail to repeat. Parker was furious. It was understandable that the bride had no one to invite, but why did she have to invite these ragamuffins? The bouquet was caught very beautifully and gracefully, for it was Charlie who did it, whose goal was to enjoy how these two were flying to hell, and not to embarrass Lucy. Not only did the invited guests make noise and spoil the mood, but Parker also kept staring at his ex. It was terribly offensive, especially offensive against the backdrop of what Cheetah had told her half an hour ago. Then she leaned towards the bride and whispered that it must be disgusting to pick up the trash thrown out by a friend. No, she's wrong. Now Parker will kiss her and everything will be fine. She is the main heroine of this story, and she will definitely be happy. She did not pick him up but took him away. She won. The couple with their friends enjoyed excellent snacks after the ceremony. They loudly praised Lucy's hanbok, claiming that her mother-in-law must have given her this beauty. Parker's mother was, to put it mildly, angry, so she immediately pounced on the waiter, forcing him to kick out the unwanted guests. They did not want to leave. They gave money for the wedding. They are guests just like everyone else. Why should they be kicked out? They also announced to the whole hall that Lucy stole her friend's boyfriend and then made her catch the bouquet. They tried to kick them out, but some man offered his card to pay for the table so that Charlie's friends, as he called them, would stop being bothered. The waiter had no chance of resisting the wealthy and physically strong man. The girls were impressed and even admired this act. After the banquet, Chetta even invited him to have a drink together sometime. As they were saying goodbye, the group of friends wished Charlie and Jeremy a good date, terribly embarrassing them. But she still invited him to have dinner since she hadn't eaten anything at the banquet. However, she gave a large sum of money as a wedding gift. I would like Lucy to spend it on cancer treatment in the future, which she was supposed to get, repeating Charlie's fate, although most likely Parker will blow it on stocks. A beautiful car sped through the streets, and an outside observer might even think that a happy married couple was sitting there. But the newlyweds quarreled. Parker accused Lucy of her friend's noisy behavior, and she defended herself vigorously. At some point, they caught up with an outrageously expensive SUV. According to the groom, even if he sold his girlfriend, he wouldn't have enough money for such a vehicle. The cars were parked side by side, an expensive black Jeep and a white foreign car with pink bows. One could have settled for simple envy if it had not turned out that this was Jeremy's car in which he was riding with Charlie. Lucy was terrified to hear Parker scolding the boss who was taking away other people's women. No, she couldn't put in so much effort to take out the trash left by her friend. Yuta had no problems or moral torments. She was satisfied that she had contributed a little money and had eaten her fill. She also had a pleasant meeting ahead. Hugh came her way. Charlie rejected him again, and it was evident. The girl who noticed his paleness had to justify that he actually looked great. The young man, of course, emphasized this, embarrassing Yuta. But it was a nice remark that lifted his spirits, and as she left by taxi, Yuta thought that he was a very good person. Charlie, who hadn't eaten enough at the banquet, sat at a table with Jeremy. She offered him her help, for he was so generous that he never left her. But he was glad to come to her aid even at 3 o'clock in the morning, and he didn't need anything in return. Besides, she should think before offering someone her help. What if he wants to use it for his own interests? It was raining outside. Jeremy could not make the girl walk in the rain, so he ran for an umbrella to the nearest 24-hour store. Charlie thought he was tall, handsome, and wealthy. Why did she like him? What did she need him for? And this is a good moment to ask. He will have to answer, since under this umbrella they are only the two of them. But he promised to tell later about the moment when the girl caught his eye. And now they were walking together and he was holding an umbrella over her, allowing his shoulder to get wet. Having reached home, they decided to drink together. How glad Jeremy was to let her into his house. Opening the fridge, the girl reached for a can of beer, and he also reached for it, finding himself too close. Too much. He smelled nice, he was very handsome, she liked him. It was hard to keep ignoring this thought. Jeremy realized it was time to take the initiative. After all, who cares about beer in such situations? And they finally allowed themselves to kiss. She actually liked Jeremy a very, very long time ago. They did indeed attend the same university, but did not interact. One day he noticed a girl doing something under a blooming sakura tree. She was sweet and modest. Behind the glasses hid a beautiful face. But what was she doing? The girl looked at the tiny kitten lying in the grass. This tiny kitten was abandoned by its mother cat, just like her. The girl got up to buy cat food and asked Jeremy to stay and keep an eye on the kitten. But why go? He had a sausage that could well be given to the cat, and he was too lazy to stand. The baby started eating and she, comforting him. The girl said that if she were as beautiful as this kitten, her mother would definitely come back to her. And then she paid for Jeremy's sausage and just left. The kitten meowed loudly, but he told it to wait for the mother cat or go after the girl. She seemed very beautiful to him. This girl, of course, was Charlie, who now lay in his bed, warmed by the cat, the very one they had once fed on the university campus. The girl was in some shock when she woke up, but her clothes were on her, and it seemed that nothing had happened between them. She didn't remember anything, but Jeremy remembered very well. Yesterday, the same man who had saved Chetta and her friends came to visit them with drinks. It turned out that he was an employee of Jeremy's. Together they sat down at the table. A merry evening began. A tipsy Charlie decided it wasn't right to leave things unfinished. In other words, she started hitting on Jeremy right in front of his employee. It was terribly embarrassing to remember this. I wanted to sink into the ground and never look people in the eye again. But work was not cancelled. I had to get up and get ready, although Jeremy said they could afford to be a little late. Lucy and Parker's honeymoon was not going well. She wanted to go for walks and spend time together, while he wanted to avoid his new wife and sit in front of the computer monitor. The girl was angry. She even threatened to tell her father-in-law that the money for the apartment had been invested in stocks, but it still didn't have the desired effect. Parker barely raised his voice when Lucy grabbed her stomach, claiming that it suddenly hurt from the stress. All this was useless. Parker didn't care, and the girl whispered plaintively that if he had gone on a trip with Charlie, everything would have been different. Although she turned on the principal. And in general, she always complained that Parker had held his position for 1,000 years, that he was a failure and would be terribly annoying to any sensible person. The guy could only pitifully claim that there was definitely nothing like that. Lucy pretended to reveal a terrible truth. It was Charlie who had asked her to divert Parker's attention to herself, and she had agreed because she was in love with him. But he looked only at her. Then Charlie asked her friend to get pregnant from the guy so that he would be forced to switch to her. Parker was furious. But she cried, said that she loved him very much and believed that Charlie would later tell him everything herself. He shook her by the shoulders, and she confessed through tears that she had indeed acted on Charlie's instructions, not of her own free will. Finally, the girl said that she had lost the child. Apparently, this happened when she was forced to apologize on her knees at the hospital. The groom, of course, was not inspired by this news. What? They registered the marriage, held the ceremony, and now a miscarriage. How could she lie to him all this time? Claim that her stomach hurt even though there was no child there? They couldn't even get divorced. Divorce was frowned upon in the Parker family, but they would have another child after all. They loved each other. Did Charlie really pull the wool over her eyes? Parker in this situation could only drink in proud solitude. It was because of his ex that he made a complete idiot of himself and married this fool. But nothing like that was planned. It all started when Charlie, who only talked to him and Lucy, bought Jeremy coffee. This idiot started putting on airs, behaving as if he were strong and protecting her. From whom? From her own boyfriend. No, he won't let them enjoy each other. Where's that business card? They'll dance some more. She used Lucy, and he uses Jeremy to destroy her. At work, there was no honeymoon period for anyone, but Charlie and her friends hurried to the list that indicated those who had been promoted. Together they discussed the pleasant scent of the fabric softener used by Miss Yannon. Derek happily joined this dialogue, as he had been wanting to ask about this aroma but could never approach. Charlie thought he liked the girl. They would look wonderful together. Utah hurried them, for the list would not read itself. It turned out that both Yannon and Derek were promoted to manager and assistant manager respectively. Sitting at work, Charlie and Utah were exchanging messages, discussing today's corporate party. Jeremy won't be there, he took a sick leave, and they'll tell him about paying the bill later. But where is he? The boss rarely takes days off. It must be something serious, and how upset he would be to have missed the event. They decided to celebrate at a small restaurant owned by Yannon's parents. They turned out to be very nice people and treated their daughter with great tenderness. Her husband, who had to do something after all, helped them in the little restaurant. Charlie had to leave. The restless Parker was writing to her again, threatening to bury her if she didn't break up with Jeremy. Right there, Yanina's husband was passing by. Next to him walked some other girl with light hair. There must have been a smoking area nearby. Returning home, Charlie looked anxiously at Jeremy's apartment door. Neither she nor Utah had received a word from him all day. She tried to reach him, pressed the intercom button several times. However, he remained silent, while desperate, loud meowing of Pani came from behind the door. Charlie then remembered that she knew Jeremy's apartment password and decided it was the perfect time to use it. It became clear why the director did not answer calls and messages. He was lying in bed. His red face showed that he had a high fever. Charlie couldn't just leave him, so she started wiping his face with a cold towel to make it at least a little better. Jeremy woke up and even sat up. He asked about the corporate party and the workday, even tried to pretend that he was fine. What a lie it was, but how sweet he was at that moment. It touched him that Charlie came to take care of him. This made the principal very, very happy. She is so beautiful. Here's what the girl didn't expect at such a moment. Compliments. She was even more embarrassed than she should have been. Well, what will you do with him? So stubborn, but so cute. Is he all right now? Of course, since she is nearby. What else is needed to feel better? Even though he was sick, she still couldn't resist kissing him. Last time she was drunk, but now it was her conscious choice. Pleasant moments resulted in having to think at work about how to behave now. What kind of relationship do they have now? No, don't think about it. What nonsense. Yes, and in general, it's high time to pull yourself together. Here's the director standing next to you. He acted as if nothing had happened, and then said that yesterday he reported an error. What? An error? Well, what? If it's about the kiss, then yes, she thinks it was a mistake too. We just need to forget about it and that's it. But no, it was a misunderstanding. His mistake was that he did not see her off. He will never be able to forget her, never! Yesterday they became a little closer, and the status of their relationship clearly changed. So tenderly no one had ever held Charlie's hands before, so gently Jeremy had never touched anyone. Parker was the one who did not experience any trepidation. He was on the verge of a scandal with the person he had approached for information about the director. A pile of money had been paid, but no one intended to dig any further. It turned out that the reason for the refusal was simple and clear. Jeremy was the grandson of the chairman of the company they worked for, one of the largest companies in Korea. That's why Charlie chose him. It was better to pretend that Parker knew nothing, and most importantly, not to publish the information obtained anywhere. The guy realized that this prey was really too much for him. Well, at least let them return the money. However, even here it was not necessary to make a scandal. Scarcely not lifted into the air by the lapels, Parker, stuttering, apologized for the insolence. And at home, Lucy was frantically rummaging through drawer after drawer, trying to find the money gifted by Charlie at the wedding. In fact, she already knew where they were. She just really didn't want to believe it. But as soon as Parker entered the apartment, she rushed up to him, asking if he had accidentally taken that money. And he didn't even deny it. Well, yes, he took it, so what? Let him ask Charlie for more, since she's so rich and can give so much away. Lucy, of course, asked where he got that from. And he, drunk, honestly answered, her boyfriend has a lot of money. It would be no small thing if Jeremy is the son of the company chairman. A chill ran down Lucy's spine. No, it couldn't be. She had tried so hard to take the best she had from Charlie so that she could find something even better? Jeremy is the oligarch's grandson, and Charlie is dating him. She even rented an apartment nearby. So everything she said and did was to make her get together with Parker? The words about what a good person he was were only said to get out of the relationship with him looking innocent? No, this is impossible! Parker's hand reached for Lucy's plate. He took her rice. She was stunned. This was her food. How could he do that? At the very least, it was cruel to say that she didn't deserve anything in this house. The memory surfaced of a mother who once also said that she deserved nothing and had nothing of her own, since everything in her house was bought with her money. Then, in childhood, she was always hungry. At school, she had to maintain the image of a beauty who ate nothing. At home, Mother hardly cooked. There was yellowed hard rice, dried pepper paste, stale anchovies available, and she was reproached for that. Then it was stunningly painful to see Charlie throwing a tantrum because her father didn't make egg rolls. Now Lucy was so angry that she couldn't fall asleep. It would be fair if Charlie also ate the nasty dried-up rice, wouldn't it? Why did everything turn out so wrong? But here the torment was interrupted by a message. It threatened the worst punishments if this reached the press. I had to read on, and that's what it was. Well, it's time to post a short message on social media. By the next morning, this small message had turned the entire internet upside down, and Charlie read how she had beaten up an innocent, anonymous pregnant girl and threatened her, how she had cheated on her boyfriend with an oligarch, lied, and committed numerous other crimes against the law and morality. The couple also saw this, and therefore called offering to deal with this insolent Lucy. But Charlie didn't need that, although she was grateful for such fervent defense. Right after that, Jeremy came running, full of concern for the girl. He hurriedly explained that his position meant nothing, that he had achieved his post himself, and had never taken advantage of his grandfather's authority. It was very sweet, and also reminiscent of a TV series. For her, he was not the grandson of the chairman. For her, he was simply Jeremy. Due to the fact that the post was anonymous and was published in a popular public, it was difficult to do anything about its spread, but at least it was clear who was to blame for this. Charlie was used to this, but touching him was a mistake. How to proceed? How to punish these two? Of course, we need to inflate this scandal even more, in such a way that they themselves regret it. And the sober Parker was already scolding Lucy in the morning, listing the punishments that awaited them if it was revealed who posted the post. Charlie's call interrupted the swearing. She asked to delete the post, because she started having big troubles. But why should Lucy do this? She's had troubles too all this time. But then Charlie offered money, exactly what she needed. Of course, since her boyfriend is the grandson of an oligarch, one can bargain and shake out more. Yes, it's high time to let Charlie know how pathetic it looks, squandering the director's money when she's a nobody herself. Why don't they meet to hand over the money? Maybe at some little restaurant, though Parker will have to come along since it's not safe to carry a large sum alone. So, they fell for her bait. And yet Charlie gave her a chance. She could have behaved honestly and avoided problems. The day of the meeting came quite quickly. Lucy was in her best dress, walking proudly as if on a catwalk, while Parker followed behind, whistling. He even condescendingly patted her on the head, although she warned him not to flatter himself. Yes, she was in a good mood, but clearly not because of him. Charlie and Jeremy were already waiting for them at the large doors, behind which they had to go for the safe transfer of money. While Lucy smugly chuckled, Parker realized what exactly went wrong today, but the girl also realized it fairly quickly. The flashes of the reporters blinded them, and the time came for Charlie and Jeremy to smugly smile. The conference on the abuse of power in the company began. Lucy and Parker had nowhere else to run. No claims could upset Charlie. She didn't promise they would be alone. The press conference began, and questions from reporters poured in randomly. Charlie took it upon herself to answer them independently. She honestly said that she is the girl from the scandalous posts and that she recently broke up with Parker. But the main reason was not Jeremy. She left him because she could not meet the high and even absurd demands of her future family. Parker jumped up from his seat and shouted that she was going too far, and besides, nothing explained why she was living next door to the son of an oligarch. However, before he could close his mouth, Utah burst into the room, triumphantly announcing that it was she who had helped Charlie with the apartment. She provided papers proving that the girl pays for the apartment herself, and Jeremy doesn't even help with utility bills. And most importantly, she was urgently looking for this apartment because Parker was stalking his ex-fiancé, and she even has a photo confirming this. A young man snatched the photograph from her and hissed that she should take her words back if she wants to extend the contract with the company. But she didn't care. Did he really think that after such a scandal he wouldn't be fired? Reporters scribbled something in their notebooks, clicked cameras, trying not to miss a single moment. Lucy realized that she had to get out of this situation. The best defense is an offense, so she turned her claims against Charlie. Why did she beat her up so badly that she lost her child? Charlie was not so easy to get through. She was not going to apologize for what she had not done. She is generally convinced that Lucy was not even pregnant. She turned to Parker. It turned out that he had never gone to the clinic with a girl, had not seen the results of tests and ultrasound scans. To check, it's enough to simply call the clinic that Lucy attended and ask the administrator to schedule her for a follow-up appointment. One of the journalists knew the number of the clinic that the girl had pointed to. The last attempt was a request to stop making a circus in front of so many busy people, but her objections were not needed by anyone. The clinic had already responded. Of course, it turned out that Lucy had never signed up there, which was even confirmed by a repeated check. Reporters pounced on Lucy even more greedily, realizing that all her statements were lies, lies, and more lies. She had nothing left but to burst into tears again. It was all because of Charlie, only because of her. What had Lucy deserved this for? Even Parker, to whom she rushed for protection, pushed her aside. She wasn't even pregnant, but she talked about a miscarriage and made him marry her. She ruined his life. He left, and she ran after him while there was a chance to escape. It was time for Jeremy to take the floor and explain that the company had nothing to do with all this. And here's the answer about the relationship from Charlie. She said that there is no relationship between them, but only for now. They already feel sympathy for each other and will start dating if Jeremy is not against it. Reporters blinded them with camera flashes again. He was happy to respond to her with consent. Under the table, they held hands, silently expressing their love. In the evening, they sat at home, drank, and decided how now, after officially announcing their relationship, Charlie would call Jeremy, since up until that moment she had addressed him by his job title. Suggestions poured in, darling, beloved, dear, but all of that was too embarrassing, and they settled simply on the name. And he also promised her to cook, wash the dishes, and clean up so that she could come home and rest after work. He held her hand, and she thought that now they were soft and tender, while in their past life they were all covered in wounds. The question of how they should now behave at work was resolved simply. Jeremy decided to quit. He had his own security firm where Sean worked, the same man who had paid for Cheetah and her friend's table. She jokingly raised an objection. What if, while she was at work, some girl took him away? But no, that won't happen, because he already loves her completely. Charlie, busy with Jeremy, did not hear Yanina's phone call and did not know that she was sobbing, sitting on the floor in the dark and alone. But as soon as the opportunity arose, the girl hurried to her friend. She opened the door, all in tears. Yanine, having calmed down a little, began to tell what had happened. At first, she began to notice that the ring kept disappearing from his finger, and each time he came up with some strange excuses. Then, in a dream, addressing someone as beloved, although I never called my wife that. Hygiene products ran out twice as fast, but at first it seemed that she was just exaggerating. But once she came home from work early on purpose and caught some girl entering their apartment, then she couldn't enter the apartment and just ran away. It seemed that if she entered, her life would collapse. Charlie listened and understood. Here was someone repeating her fate of betrayal. Once she herself had caught her husband, whom she trusted, with a mistress. The girl began to gently persuade Yanin that there was no need to preserve an unhappy marriage, even for the sake of the child. She herself grew up with only her father, and was much happier than she could have been with constantly quarreling parents. Yanina listened to these words and firmly decided the time had come to get divorced. She has abilities, a home, and parents. She will cope for the sake of her daughter, and Charlie will help her. Together they can do anything. At that moment, they grew very close and finally admitted that their friendship went beyond just work. In addition, at that time in Korea, treason was still considered a crime and was punished quite severely, up to 2 years imprisonment. Together, they found the page of the girl with whom Yanin's husband was cheating on her. There was evidence that they had spent a long time together. She posted photos without any embarrassment. Besides, Charlie recognized her. It was the same girl who had passed by when they were celebrating Yanin's promotion. The girl was furious. He was cheating right under her nose. Now she understood what to do. She would pretend to go on a business trip, but instead return home and catch the cheater off guard. The girl's stomach even hurt from nerves, and she doubled over, claiming that she needed to drink less coffee. In the evening, Charlie ran into Jeremy again. He was worried about her, but she insisted that she was fine. The girl thanked him for the offered help, but said that she could handle all this herself. He hugged her goodbye, claiming that he believed in her and knew that she would cope. The next day, Yanina was leaving on a business trip. The husband hypocritically smiled and waved goodbye to her, thinking that the most beautiful thing about his wife was her back when she was leaving. Definitely, he was glad that she was leaving. One can have fun alone. More precisely, not alone, but in the company of a woman whom he truly loves. He locked himself up with her in the apartment, unaware that the police were already at his doorstep. The law enforcers were equipped with a camera and could record the act of betrayal on the spot. Yanin flung open the apartment door, interrupting her husband's pleasant pastime. He did not let her down. In bed with his mistress, he seemed to be posing deliberately for a compromising shot. Yanin asked Charlie to wait outside, but the girl said that she needed to do one small thing before leaving. She took and overturned a small chest of drawers, opaquely hinting and directly saying out loud that she would not allow her husband to disturb the peace of her friend. The girl went out and pondered. Now they had caught the man cheating, and in her life, death followed this. A policeman flew out of the room as if he had been pushed out of there. Charlie burst inside and realized that her suspicions were correct. Yanin was lying on the floor, clearly having been struck on the head. The only thing that saved her from death was that a couple of minutes earlier, Charlie had thrown a dresser, which the girl could have hit her head against. Sometime later, they were sitting in the hospital and talking about how Yanina was actually lucky, since she got away with just a mild concussion. Their conversation was interrupted by the appearance of medical staff. Charlie tensed up because it could only mean one thing. Miss Yanin was found to have stomach cancer, just like Charlie once had. However, the stage of the disease development was very early, and it could be easily dealt with through surgery. Thanks to her friend, for it was she who insisted that Yanina undergo an additional examination. Charlie left the ward, more pensive than joyful. She prevented her colleague's death with her actions, saved her, albeit accidentally, and yet she thought that Lucy had taken her fate. One action after another, she eventually impacted another person's life. No, Lucy will answer for this. To pass on this vile fate to her, to force her to die right before the eyes of her husband's mistress. She herself must take Parker away. After going out onto the street, Charlie made one very important call. Meanwhile, Parker was burning with anger in front of the computer screen. Why, oh, why were these stocks constantly falling? Of course, Lucy didn't entertain him either. Besides, she had cooked kimchi soup for him again, which had become more tiresome than bitter radish. And what else could she cook? They had both lost their jobs, they had no money at all, and Parker had invested the last of it in stocks. The girl, offended by her husband's claims, went out, slamming the door, and he decided to call an unfamiliar number from which someone had just texted him. The girl explained. She thought it was the number of another young man, but it seems she mixed up a couple of digits. Parker was terribly pleased. He had talked to a girl he liked, and he would not miss the opportunity to communicate with her in the future. Lucy, busy with the laundry, also listened to the female voice, although it was the voice of her mother-in-law, who was calling her to cook broth from cow's hooves. The woman reproached her for not getting pregnant, and was indignant. What do you mean? Lucy is not to blame? Then who is to blame, Parker? If she doesn't give birth, then she has no place in this family. With Charlie, everything would have turned out much better. She wouldn't have dragged the precious little son into scandals and would have brought in money. Angry, Lucy threw the laundered towel on the floor. Why do they keep talking about that wench? Why is she worse than Charlie? She's more beautiful, more successful. She deserved more in this life. Even when silent, Parker thought about her. He loaded up breakup songs, looked at her social media pages. What if they started communicating again? Does he really think she'll put up with that? Parker was left with nothing but drinking with friends, without even the opportunity to pay the bill at the cafe. He could only tell that he had been corresponding with some interesting stranger. He did not know that this stranger was Charlie. She put down the phone in which she had just politely declined a meeting. Together with one of Chetta's friends, Karen, they were sitting in a cafe and discussing the current situation. The girl was not against helping if there would be no problems. Parker heard her voice then. That same evening, Charlie and Jeremy were drinking coffee, resting after a long day. The guy was joking that his girlfriend looked very suspicious. But he did not just believe her, he trusted her. For giving her a new phone and also for resembling a little dog, he asked for a small reward. She did not regret sweetly kissing him on the cheek. Parker came home in the middle of the night, drunk and angry. Without even washing or undressing, he fell into bed and fell asleep. Filled with suspicions of infidelity, Lucy went through his phone and there found what she was looking for, messages from some girl. Filled with anger, she texted this unknown number from her phone. However, it turned out that the girl did not know that Parker was married, and she last exchanged messages with him at 11 p.m. But he returned much later. Could it be that he was with Charlie after all? It can't be that they've resumed their relationship. The stranger began to console Lucy and even apologized for talking to the occupied guy. This girl is her comforting her? Giving advice on how to catch him red-handed? Charlie advised her to get checked and even make her husband do it under the pretext that her mother-in-law insisted. Lucy liked this option. Why not prove that she's healthy? Maybe then they'll leave her alone. So very soon she was sitting in the hospital and waiting for the test results. Parker refused to come, as if he didn't care at all. How angry and offended she was. Did she need this child? The doctor showed the results. Lucy was all right, but Parker's sperm count was 20 times lower than the minimum required for conception. So, all that she went through, all the humiliations, all because of his infertility. For what was all this? Lucy headed to her mother-in-law's from the hospital. Although the latter was not happy about the delay, she still let the girl in and ordered her to help with the cooking. In the kitchen sat the women friends. Together they discussed that daughters-in-law should be kept in an iron grip. They wouldn't be sitting here for nothing, would they? Casually, Lucy put the papers with the test results on the table and went to the sink herself. Women immediately dug into the papers and discovered that these were the results of a study. The girl, busy with vegetables and without even turning around, said, "Yes, that's exactly what they see. Parker has azoospermia. He cannot have children, and a repeat analysis confirmed this." The mother-in-law was in shock. How is this possible? But it doesn't matter. They will live happily even without children. The mother-in-law's friends realized that it was awkward to stay any longer and left under a plausible pretext. No one even paid attention to them. Filled with rage and upset, the mother-in-law accused Lucy of not having to check her husband, and even more so, show papers to outsiders. But is Lucy to blame? She just put the folder on the table to deal with the vegetables. She was even accused of this. The woman said that it was all because of the wrong daughter-in-law. It was the last straw. Well, let them fire her if she's to blame. Who needs such a pathetic, unemployed husband anyway? For the elderly woman, it was too much. She suddenly felt unwell. The mother-in-law fell, having lost consciousness. Lucy sat down next to her and examined the woman. It was clear that she was in a terrible state, but the girl smiled pretendedly. Yes, she was fine. She simply left. Her husband will help his mother-in-law, just when he returns from fishing in a few days. Charlie, she wrote that she was glad about it. That old lady was always boasting about her health. Finally, she got what she deserved. But she was with Jeremy, and they were discussing marriages of convenience. It turned out that he had many friends who had married in this way, and he himself sometimes went on blind dates. It's even strange that he didn't appeal to anyone. Charlie made him give her the phone to turn on the camera. She praised him, claimed that he was brave, although he seemed intimidating at first. He smiled at the fact that the girl treated him so well. Charlie caught the moment and even managed to photograph the guy. He refused to delete the photo. At that moment, he liked the girl. He needed that shot. At that moment, they were happy together. But in the new photo, both Charlie and Jeremy were smiling. Such moments must be preserved both in photos and in memory. Parker, meanwhile, arrived at the hospital. His mother lay in bed, surrounded by some devices, and could not even speak. The father explained what had happened. She had fainted, and because no one had helped her, she had suffered a cerebral hemorrhage. Lucy rushed to the bedside. It was all her fault. It was she who did not stay at home with her mother-in-law, but went to prepare dinner for her husband, and therefore there was no one to help when it was needed. Parker decided, let the girl take care of her mother. She is the only one not working. She will come every day and cook at home for both him and his father. When they got into the car, the father-in-law saw some papers and also decisively rummaged through them. Now the father saw the test results too. Could Parker really have so few sperm? The certificate flew to the floor in anger. Yes, with such indicators, he is infertile, a useless puppy who cannot continue the lineage. Parker was yelling at Lucy over the phone at home, accusing her of having done that test. One after another came reports that he owed money to various banks, and also that his stocks were failing one by one. All he could do was drown his sorrows in alcohol. What should he do? If only Charlie were here, she would help him. He decided to call her, and she even answered. Mother is in the hospital. There is no money. It is so hard for him. They have to start everything from scratch. But here he got an answer. It wasn't Charlie. Jeremy picked up the phone for her. He's Charlie's guy, and he has the right to talk to Parker however he pleases. In addition, he handed the girl over to his security, and if the ex dares to approach her, he will be in trouble. Parker didn't even have anyone to yell at. Jeremy said what he wanted and hung up. The guy was awaited at home by peace and quiet. Charlie was playing with the cat, homely and sweet. Parker had only to throw the phone and shout, "What right did he have? It's all because of that fool Lucy. As soon as mother recovers, he will divorce." At that moment, a newspaper with an insurance ad caught his eye. Oh yes, an excellent idea. The little wife will pay for her behavior. Lucy herself, sitting by her mother-in-law's bed, complained to her anonymous friend about this heavy burden. She knew that a woman needed warmth, and so she pulled the blanket off her and carefully fanned her with a fan. As soon as Parker came, I had to pull the blanket up higher. She takes such good care of her mother-in-law, but she's not getting any better. What a pity. The husband brought her good news. They are going on vacation. She deserved it with her kindness. One should sometimes rest. The neighbor came over. She heard they were leaving and offered the number of an acquaintance caregiver. Everyone quickly gets back on their feet with her. Oh no, Lucy cannot afford this. If her mother-in-law recovers, she will tell that the girl saw her faint and did not help. But it was too late. While the girl was convincing them that she could handle it herself, the neighbors had already called a caregiver and arranged everything. No. If she recovers, then Lucy won't get well. When everyone left, she sat by the bed, torn by contradictions. She couldn't leave. No way she could leave. But didn't she deserve a break? Why should she even dance around this useless old woman? What is she to do? What to do? A nurse came in. She was about to give an injection, but the syringe turned out to be defective. The girl explained, "If blood gets into the blood, then a woman can die. You need to take a new one." It was not worth mentioning this. As soon as the nurse left, Lucy resolutely approached the IV stand, but it turned out to be not very convenient. And then the girl leaned towards her mother-in-law with a syringe in her hand. Nothing if she dies. After all, she must make way for the living. After all, it's unfair if Lucy loses the little she has. The woman will simply fall asleep and that's it. It will be a long sleep and nothing more. He'll just leave life a little earlier. Barely sobered up, Parker was awakened by a knock at the door. A courier had brought a package. These were printouts of Lucy's correspondence. There she complained about the Parker family and him personally, mocking her unconscious mother-in-law. This was the very girl who had written to him. These two fools were discussing such things. Ungrateful, she gives me goosebumps. Yes, the idea of insurance is definitely worth implementing. She will be punished for her mother. Not putting off what he had planned for long, Parker went to the parking lot and did something to the brakes. They will not let him down. She is in for a hellish journey. Tomorrow it will all be over. He will only have to pretend to be a sad husband, and then get the insurance and solve all his problems. Finally, he threw a lighter into the car. It was time to say goodbye to this car. Soon he would buy a new one. Charlie could not understand what Lucy was writing to her about. Since when did Parker take the killer of his mother on resort trips? He had read everything she had sent him. In her past life, she experienced all the charms of life with this person. In this life, this pleasure fell on Lucy's shoulders, everything, including cheating with her best friend. And also, then he was planning to get insurance. Is this trip really a way to get money at the cost of his own wife's life? Parker was drinking again, playing cards on his computer. Hey, he's almost rich. Just a little more and he'll get his millions. The phone rang here. The father started the dialogue with a shout and insults. But why? All because his mother died while he was blubbering here. Forgetting everything, Parker jumped into the car. He could not believe it was true. It seemed that everyone on the road was terribly slow. He kept increasing his speed and demanded that they give way to him. However, one of the trucks did not move from its place, and it was necessary to slow down, but the brakes weren't working. He himself broke them yesterday. We need to do something. Parker, screaming in horror, swerved to the side. The car was flying straight into the bridge railing. The collision occurred, but the safety system worked conscientiously. The airbag prevented Parker from dying from the collision, and he was already rejoicing that he had survived. However, the lighter thrown into the car yesterday made itself known. The car exploded, taking Parker's life. His body was engulfed in flames, the scream tearing his lungs. How could this be? The car lost its fragile balance and fell into the water. Will he really die like that? He was going to buy a new car with the insurance money. The mother and son were buried on the same day. Lucy was thrashing on the floor in hysterics, crushed by grief, choking on tears. How could they leave her, depart from life so early? The people invited to the funeral were whispering, looking at the girl. They say she didn't take her eyes off her mother-in-law in her last minutes, poor thing. The father-in-law sent Lucy to rest in another room. It was hard for him to watch the tears of the grief-stricken girl. She obediently withdrew, filling the corridor with her sobs. Finally, she can stop pretending. Her throat even hurts from all that sobbing. Why would she mourn that freak? She had already been informed that the night before he had been doing something with the car, and before that he had taken out insurance on Lucy. Because of him, she almost died. Good thing he kicked the bucket. At the funeral came employees of the office where Parker had previously worked. Charlie could not believe that everything ended so tragically. These people ruined her life. She had no good memories of them, but she still wished them to rest in peace. She was their former daughter-in-law and therefore wanted to get to the bottom of such injustice, at least a little. Lucy, meanwhile, was diligently pretending that she had been crying all the time she had spent alone. But the feigned tears quickly dried up when she saw Charlie and Yuta. What are they doing here? You came to say goodbye? First, Charlie made her out to be a scammer, got Parker in trouble for dismissal, caused all these problems for them, and now she's saying goodbye? But Charlie didn't want any scandals. She had already done everything she intended to do, and so she decided to simply leave. However, Lucy was not going to let them go just like that. Accusing the girls of all the troubles in the world, she burst into tears and threw herself on the floor. Charlie felt only contempt for this. She clearly stated that she had nothing to do with what happened. But Yuta decided that they fight fire with fire, and also fell to her knees lamenting, "Oh, what will Lucy do now without Parker, without her mother-in-law all alone?" The girl was so surprised that she even stopped pretending to be a victim abandoned by everyone. Charlie didn't care whether Lucy was going to call the police or do something else. She came up close to her and said that she knew whose fault it was that her mother-in-law was dead. The girl nearly lost her power of speech. How does she know? Well, how can you not know? After all, Lucy herself told everything. No, could it be that mysterious friend, Charlie? She must be expelled before... Yes, the police. I must tell the police that she killed Parker, and now she's threatening her too. The men clarified her name. Lucy, exactly. Well, then she is arrested on suspicion of murdering her mother-in-law. The reaction exceeded all expectations. Breaking free from the hands of the law enforcement officers, she was screaming that she did not commit the murder and that only Charlie should be investigated and arrested. But it turned out that the prosecution had a witness. That same neighbor who offered help with the caregiver saw Lucy kill her mother-in-law. And yet in reality she envied Charlie. She had a good family, many friends. Little Lucy looked at her and didn't understand why everyone loved her. A lanky girl and a nerd, too. Just a combo. One day she happened to learn that her friend had no mother, and her joy knew no bounds. Until it turned out that she had a wonderful father. Why was Charlie so happy with her father, and Lucy so unhappy with her mother? Somehow they spent time together, talking about the departed mother. Charlie missed her a little, but she had her father, and she was doing quite well. Besides, she had a photo of her mother, in which she looked like a very beautiful woman. Lucy could not believe her eyes. It was the one her father had left for. The very one for whom she received beatings, reproaches, and insults every day. The father went to her, but the mother claimed that this wayward daughter was to blame for everything. If she is the reason for the father's departure, then probably Charlie was also left without a mother only because of her own misbehavior? All this is because of her, and Lucy's prison now threatens only because of her, too. How is it possible for such a repulsive person to live happily? One could only cry, sincerely for the first time in a long while, and shout after him. No tears will save her from prison. On the contrary, it turned out that if she doesn't calm down, they will lock her up at the precinct. But she still had a chance to get a deferment. Lucy began to beg to be allowed to stay with her relatives until the end of the funeral, and, surprisingly, she was even allowed to remain under police supervision. Feverishly thinking how to escape, Lucy tried to ask to go to the toilet, but even there, one of the employees escorted her to the doors. The only thing they didn't take into account was that the toilet was combined with the utility room. Therefore, Lucy was able to change clothes, gather her hair, and leave without attracting attention. The employee did not notice her at all, rummaging in his phone. In this difficult moment for Lucy, Chief Smith was striding across the parking lot. He noticed a girl huddled in the corner, drenched in tears. The man could not leave his beloved pet there alone and, of course, seated her in his car. He even offered her strawberry milk, but the girl plaintively asked for something hot. So as soon as Smith went out to go to the store, she moved to the driver's seat. "Thanks for the car, old man." Lucy saw Jeremy in the parking lot right in front of her as she was about to leave. Charlie was coming towards him, too happy for today. She's having fun with a rich guy as if nothing had happened? They're even hugging right in public, right before her eyes. The girl couldn't know that at that moment Charlie decided she no longer needed revenge, she just wanted to live her new life happily. No, Lucy could not stand it. If she was going to prison, she would at least send the two of them to the next world. Let them pay for everything they have done! Jeremy oriented himself faster than Charlie. He clearly understood that the two of them would not have time to jump out from under the car. Therefore, he pushed the girl away so that she fell onto the stone floor of the parking lot. And he himself was hit by a car. Jeremy hit his head on the concrete, and a disgustingly red puddle slowly spread around him. By the door of the hospital ward sat the chairman, Grandpa Jeremy. By his bedside wept Yuta and Charlie. For a long time he was unconscious, the prognoses were unclear. Charlie was tormented by the thought that it was all because of her. Fate was supposed to pass to someone. Someone was supposed to die. But who? She promises to sort everything out while he is unconscious. In the courtroom, Parker's father was shaking with suppressed sobs, having lost everyone at once. The doors flung open, and Lucy was brought in wearing a prison uniform surrounded by reporters. Charlie looked at her with even greater hatred, not even hiding her contempt. The session began. Lucy was accused of the premeditated murder of her mother-in-law, but she denied her guilt until the very end. Here the witness was invited to speak, that same elderly neighbor woman. She claimed that usually, when people are cared for, they get at least a little better, but that woman was fading away with each passing day. As soon as the talk turned to introducing heir, Lucy screamed that this old woman was slandering out of envy for her youth and beauty. The judge even had to call the girl to order. The prosecution provided evidence that the cause of death was an air embolism. In addition, video recorder footage was provided, proving that Lucy attempted to run over Charlie and Jeremy. The lawyer had absolutely nothing to say. The girl rushed to shake him by the scruff of the neck. After all, he was her defense. Why was he silent? The prosecution side directly stated she is a murderer, and she does not even regret her actions. Lucy simply didn't understand what was wrong with all these people. She hadn't done anything bad. Although, of course, it's all because of Charlie and her boyfriend Jeremy. He has a ton of money. Despite Lucy's desperate cries, the judge passed the sentence, life imprisonment. When the trial was over, at the exit, Charlie ran into Parker's father. He angrily threw at her that if she had married his son, nothing like that would have happened. But instilling a sense of guilt in her was not so simple. And where was he when his wife was tormenting his daughter-in-law? He was silent because he considered it normal to treat a woman as an incubator and a servant. He was no less than others, and clearly more than her, involved in all these deaths. Upon returning home, Charlie looked into the neighboring apartment and took Panny with her. Together with the cat, she gathered all the necessary things, towels, toys, bowls. While searching for other things, Charlie entered Jeremy's office. On the table stood an April calendar, lagging behind by several months. One of the dates was highlighted. On that day, she went back 10 years. October 2nd, when she was getting married to Parker, was also highlighted and signed, "Do not run away." At the bottom of the calendar, an address was written, but in 2009 addresses were still written differently. It was only several years later that they would start writing them in that way. In addition, a note was inserted into the calendar. It can't be. This note was meant for her. Has he also returned to the past? In fact, when Jeremy was a student, he often encountered one girl. She loved flowers and was constantly fussing with cats. He often thought about her, but at that time, he still did not understand that he liked her. He, like a fool, wasted so much time just looking at her and never once talking to her until graduation. Instead of her, he had to make do with that very cat. He found it and brought it home. And when they were hiring staff for the office, he personally asked to have Charlie assigned to his department. She did not remember him, but it did not bother him. Every day he felt guilty because he could not respond to her the way he wanted, although he rehearsed the lines at night. He so regretted that day when she started getting closer to Parker. He should have talked to her then, instead of silently watching from the sidelines. He should have at least treated her to some meat, but he lacked the courage. When she asked him to write her a recommendation for extending her contract, he thought it was the best he could do for her. Perhaps she would be happier with Parker. He was satisfied with her smile, but from the side he saw how Parker was flirting with Lucy. I heard him openly tell the girl that she is much more beautiful. Jeremy openly told him that he would not allow him to chat in the kitchen while others were doing his work. Parker did not want to admit that Charlie had prepared the documents for him. Once she came in new earrings, the very ones that the traitor Lucy had given her. He then said that they didn't suit her, although he wanted to say that Parker didn't suit her. When she married Parker, he finally decided to quit. Several years passed, and then rumors reached him that she had fallen ill. When he came to her ward, Charlie was not there, only the IV drip remained. It became clear that the girl had run away, and he, catching the first taxi that came along, rushed to her home. He could not bring himself to either call out to her or enter the house until he heard a scream. And then there were no more questions, he ran to her. But when he entered the apartment, it was already too late. He had only to hold her in his arms and persuade her to come to. Then he came to her funeral, which he himself had organized. The police reported that she had no relatives to contact and handed over her phone. There were many videos with cats and flowers. So much time had passed, but she still loved them. If only he could go back. But it was too late. All he could do was sob on his knees in front of her photo. On that day, Yanin also came to see Charlie off on his final journey. Sitting down next to him, she sighed sadly. It seems he never confessed his feelings to the girl, and now it's too late. Why didn't he take the first step? What was stopping him? After all, it was Charlie. She would have treated him at least in a friendly way. The couple with their girlfriends also appeared at the funeral. They discussed that it was a terrible fate, to die like that, catching her husband with her best friend on the last day of her life. Lucy has now disappeared from everywhere, not responding. They are all very guilty before Charlie, but now they can only ask for forgiveness from the soulless photo, surrounded by mourning flowers. Utah remembered the girl as a kind, caring person who helped her during their time working together. She hoped only that in the next life their paths would cross. Hugh, who had never confessed his feelings to his beloved girlfriend, also shed tears onto the wooden floor. After the funeral, Jeremy got into a taxi and went to the sea. He was not afraid of freezing on the coast, for in his memory were stored the memories of a person who had spent his entire life in the endless cold of loneliness. The same taxi driver who once took Charlie away from the hospital was driving him. He was friendly, saying that his daughter was tall, beautiful, and kind. Someone like Jeremy would be just right for her. The boss thought that this was exactly what Charlie was like. If he had a chance to live his life again, he would give her everything he had. Finally, they arrived. No longer concerned with material possessions, Jeremy gave the taxi driver an amount that was far more than necessary. After all, no one would be worse off because of it. Once Utah taught him to draw little hearts to mark what he likes. Then he drew it on whatever came to hand on a banknote. This very banknote he handed to the taxi driver. A small token of love, at least, would not perish with him. And he will probably go where his place is now. It's not so scary to drown, is it? But when he opened his eyes, it turned out to be not the afterlife chambers, but simply his own office. It was April 10th, 2009, but how is this possible? Charlie was standing right there, alive and well. At that moment, Parker was raising his voice at her again. He was determined in this life to do everything to make her happy and smile more often. Reading this letter, Charlie could not hold back her tears. He too was reborn. He wrote this letter for her. He came back to save her. If he had been protecting her all this time, now it was her turn to do everything for his benefit. She had so much left to tell him, and they still had so much ahead of them. If he wanted to be by her side, he had to open his eyes soon. Charlie did not know that at that moment, on the other side of life, Jeremy was sitting in that very same taxi again. He sat in the back seat full of sad determination. The driver was even amused by the young man's desire to take on Charlie's fate and die instead of her. But there is a person who is waiting for him. Jeremy must make Papa's Princess Charlie happy. It's not time to die yet. We need to go back. And when Jeremy's eyes opened, he saw Charlie holding his hand, all in tears. It seemed she no longer even believed that he would come to, and she threw herself around the young man's neck as soon as she realized that he had regained consciousness. But why didn't he tell her anything? Why did he hide the truth for so long? For he knew her, knew of her death. How long had he been planning to remain silent? When they went for a walk in the park, Charlie also told that she had been reborn, and told a little about her past. It was unclear why she remembered it, but she recalled how once she had a strong craving for black noodles. After paying off her debts, she had no money left, so she bought instant noodles. The mother-in-law immediately pounced on her. Instead of feeding her husband, she's eating who knows what and idling around? In the end, she had already eaten enough, and it didn't matter that the plate was almost untouched. Let her cook shrimp for them for lunch. Soon, Parker and his mother-in-law were eating with pleasure, while the girl silently washed the dishes. After the end of the dinner, the husband generously gave her the leftovers. Then she was not abandoned by the thought that he was not such a bad person, that deep down he had something good. When she realized that it was not at all like that, it was already too late, and that's why in this life she decided to change everything. But it turned out not to be so simple. It was not easy to escape fate, and one had to face the same events, only in a different setting. And something was indeed bypassing Charlie, but then it would inevitably affect his loved ones. She was so afraid that he would die instead of her, but he would protect her to the last. He would not leave her. At that moment, Yuta was surrounded by less tragedy, but she was worried about Hugh, who was working late at his cafe. She decided to go in, although the girl was embarrassed that the young man was already closing the cafe. In addition, he saved some pudding for her. Hugh had golden hands. Only his baking could melt Yuta's heart. It was nice to see such a reaction. Of course, he would be happy to see it more often. Besides, he always has a tasty treat hidden away. And although this little piece always remained for Charlie, the hope was empty. Everyone around knew that she was dating Jeremy. In fact, Hugh had long since stopped hoping, for he saw how she looked at the boss. And though he stopped hoping, leaving the last piece is the only thing he can do. What a beautiful and foolish man. If he keeps talking like that, Yuta will sooner or later want to come back here to him. Miss Yanin that same evening was returning home. For the first time in a long time, it was more pleasant for her to go there than to work. Suddenly, she discovered that Derek was standing right next to her. Since when did he ride the subway? Was it more convenient for him? Not continuing the conversation about this, the young man handed Yanin his player. She did not refuse, and she even liked the song that was playing in the headphones, but through the sounds of the song, Derek seemed to confess his love for Yanin to himself. She immediately took off her headphones and handed the player back. No, this confession is not at all what she needs. Derek refused to take the gift back. If she didn't need it, let her throw it away. As a result, on her way home, Yanin was listening to music on her player. She had to jump out at her station, barely avoiding the closing doors, and she simply didn't have time to shove the player into the hands of her annoying colleague after all. A girl was waiting for an unpleasant surprise at home. Her husband was standing in the dark, away from the streetlight, and was clearly waiting for her. Of course, this meeting was not what one would want on a dark evening in a deserted courtyard. What was he doing here? She had said that they would only communicate through a lawyer. The little husband tried to appear friendly. All he needs is for her to withdraw the lawsuit. Of course she refused, and even more so, she would not allow him to manipulate her daughter. However, when she told Charlie about this, her friend advised her to withdraw the lawsuit. It was unknown how long the law would be in effect, and if it was repealed, this person would be released even angrier than before. This may simply be dangerous. She'd better set out the conditions under which she will divorce him and withdraw the lawsuit. When Yanina was getting ready to go home, Derek caught up with her at the elevator, but the girl clearly stated she has a husband, albeit almost an ex-husband, and a daughter. She is not interested in this young man, but it seemed not to bother him. He offered to accompany his colleague, just in case her husband did something. At the cafe where they had arranged to meet, Yanin handed the traitor an envelope with a document that spelled out the terms of the divorce. They included compensation, retaining the apartment for the wife, and renunciation of parental rights. Yes, what made her think the apartment belonged to her? So what if she paid with her own money? He was just going through a small crisis. And what kind of monetary compensation is this? Has she become insolent? Well, no means no. Janina took the documents and left the cafe, ignoring that her husband ran after her. Full of anger, he tried to exchange compensation for parental rights. He didn't need his daughter, but he didn't want to pay compensation. Of course, the girl refused. Then, realizing that he could not achieve his goal, he was about to hit his ex-wife. But the hand fell on Derek, who shielded Yanin with his body. He was right when he said it could be dangerous. Derek said that he wouldn't mind taking a couple more punches. It would be nice to give this fool an extra point in the indictment. It was simply humiliating to stay, so the traitor simply turned around and left, cursing them with all his might. He helped her, but Janina did not want this, did not ask for it. She gave him the player and also prepared to leave. In the end, she cannot drag him into her problems. Looking at the girl's back, Derek took a small box out of his bag. Soon it will be her daughter's birthday. This holiday friend celebrated a couple of days later on a special site in the park. Yuta entertained the baby with all her might, getting genuine pleasure from communicating with her. Before leaving, Jeremy sweetly said goodbye to Charlie, and everyone immediately noticed what a cute couple they were. No one knew that at that moment around the corner there was a car in which Janina's ex-husband, together with his mistress, were plotting something sinister. If he takes the daughter, he will be able to blackmail his wife into giving up her conditions, stop demanding compensation, or even transfer the apartment to him. He would have gone for the girl himself, but his mistress can't drive. So let her go then. Very fortunately, at that moment, they decided to play hide and seek. When the little one went to hide, she stumbled upon a cute little bunny, as if peeking out from behind the corner on its own. But this little bunny turned out to be just a lure. Upon hearing the child's cry, Yanin jumped up from the table. The girls immediately rushed after the mistress, fleeing with the baby. She managed to drag the child to the car and even complained that it was too heavy. But then Yuta pounced on the girl, and Charlie hurriedly took Yanin's daughter away before she got hurt. Jeremy's sister was raging, ready to tear out all the hair of the kidnapper, and that was in the best-case scenario. Yanin's ex-husband nobly decided to make tracks while he himself didn't get it, but Yana's father did not allow him to escape. He practically tore the traitor out of the car by the lapels, intending to dispense justice. And in general, who did this insignificant person dare to call father-in-law here? As a result, they all ended up at the police station. The husband diligently pretended to be the victim, while his mistress simply cried quietly. Then she also started accusing Yuta of attacking her without reason, and she didn't steal the child, it's all lies. The policeman lazily advised to agree on reconciliation and not make noise at the station. Agree? What is this? They're stealing a child right in front of the mother's eyes, and they're advising them to come to an agreement. But the scandal did not have time to break out properly. The doors opened and 3 men entered the precinct. One of them turned out to be a lawyer who immediately announced that he would represent Yanin's rights. Derek had recorded evidence on a dictaphone that Yanin's husband did not actually want to see his daughter, as he claimed, but was actually kidnapping her. Upon learning the new details, Yuta seemed to flare up with anger. Only the presence of law enforcement officers prevented her from taking immediate revenge. Janina received the business card of a lawyer who turned out to be Derek's brother and was ready to take on her case. Derek himself loomed menacingly over the policeman. Was it just him, or did the man plan to cover up the case? Miss Yanin seemed not even to expect that so many people could take her side, and that someone would offer her such significant help. On the street, they all said goodbye. Charlie explained that it was she who had called Jeremy, and he himself had brought the other men. Yanin did not want to leave. She would wait until Derek left the site. He needed to be thanked for asking his brother for help. It turned out that some time ago Derek had asked Charlie to intervene if necessary. Today, without hesitation, she called her boyfriend. In the end, they said goodbye and Janina remained waiting. It took quite a long time before the brothers finally left the site. The girl's hands were already frozen by that time and her phone had run out of battery. First of all, Derek was concerned that she was cold, then about her daughter. But since she waited for him and wants to thank him, why don't they go out to eat together? He offered but did not really hope for consent. However, Yanin's gratitude was great enough for her to agree to this. Yes, they go out to eat meat together, she treats. Then Derek was finally able to give her that little box so that she could pass it on to his daughter. The gift's contents turned out to be cute, and the mother with the child in the ball seemed to hint that he was satisfied that Yanin had a daughter. A new workday began, and while the other employees were already sitting at their tasks, the boss Smith was only hurrying to his desk. This was his third tardiness, so Yanina ordered him to write an explanatory note. Being higher in position than him, she could demand it. While Smith claimed that her position wasn't that important after all, and that she should be more respectful to her elders, Derek found something interesting on the company's website. It turned out that it was an announcement about Yanin's promotion. Now she has the right to make him write an explanatory note, doesn't she? During the break, the girl was drinking tea on the roof, and it was at that very moment that Derek, who had approached from behind, frightened her. She won the case and was now legally a free woman, but he still shouldn't hang around. After all, she was just a single mother. Despite this, Derek whispered to the girl that she had appealed to him from their very first meeting, and appealed to him even more when he got to know her better. He did help her. Why wouldn't they go on a date at least as a thank you? On the same day, Charlie and Jeremy stood in front of the door of the chairman's office, who for some reason had summoned the two of them. When the door opened, the man was sitting at the table with a newspaper and did not look angry. It turned out that Charlie had recently turned down her scheduled promotion. Jeremy tried to explain everything himself, but the chairman interrupted the young man. The question about the reasons was asked specifically to the girl. She resolutely replied that she wanted to get a promotion on her own merits and did not need additional patronage. Charlie really turned down the new position. It would have been unfair to get it then, when Yanin, for example, is being promoted for her merits and not because she is dating the chairman's grandson. The chairman was surprised. Could she really refuse the position even if he said that the decision had been made taking into account her merits? The girl really refused, respectfully bowed, and left the office. Jeremy alone remained, embarrassed and proud of his girlfriend. The chairman turned out to be very pleased with what he saw. And why did Jeremy bring her only now? This is exactly what his daughter-in-law should be like. But no, it seems there will be no wedding, and the young man claims that the problem is not with him. But the chairman was sure that if the grandson had behaved normally, she would not have refused the wedding. Did he cook, clean up, wash the dishes, drive her to and from work? If he didn't even do this minimum, it's amazing how Charlie has stayed with him until now. But Jeremy really did all this. He couldn't let his beloved do this after work as well. The problem is really not with him. Having reported this, Jeremy left the office quite upset. And the chairman had already called Director Oliver to find out if anything had happened in the life of his grandson that he was unaware of. Jeremy was thinking about why there would be no wedding. In fact, some time ago, he had accidentally overheard Charlie talking to Panny and reasoning that in this life she was not striving to get married. She wanted to build her happy life and be primarily a person for herself. It turned out that Charlie had waited for him from the office. She was very worried, but it turned out that the chairman had not said anything special. They did not pay attention to the woman in an unremarkable suit standing nearby. The flash on her phone blinked briefly, confirming that a photo had just been taken. The next morning, Charlie woke Jeremy up for work. Although they were not husband and wife, they still took care of each other. But the young man did not want to go anywhere, and certainly did not want to let her go. The phone, of course, rang at the most inopportune moment, and Charlie had to insist that he answer it. What if it was something important? It turned out to be really important. The grandson of the chairman of a large company was again the focus of close attention. Someone published an article about their alleged upcoming wedding. Charlie didn't want to worry about it. She had learned something at that conference. Rumors remain rumors. There's no point in reacting to them. Therefore, she simply went to work. Articles are articles, but no one will do her job instead of her. At the very entrance, clearly upset by what had happened, Jeremy apologized for once again causing inconvenience to Charlie. If it weren't for him, her name wouldn't be dragged through the mud everywhere. But for him in any of his lives, her happiness was the most important thing. If she wants to leave, he won't hold her back and will understand everything. It was not the most pleasant thing one could hear. Charlie resolutely got out of the car and angrily flung open the door on Jeremy's side. The young man was dumbfounded, surprised by such a turn of events. Would he force her to leave and be happy without him? But who gave him the right to decide? Let him stop talking nonsense and escort her to the office. Standing in the elevator, hidden by the backs of the crowd, they were forced to listen to gossip about their relationship. Jeremy could barely restrain himself from telling the gossips exactly what he thought of them. But Charlie took his hand, asking him not to get excited and showing that it did not offend her. A couple of minutes later, they reached their floor, and the request to give way inevitably drew attention to them. Standing behind the open doors, Charlie calmly stated that, although they hadn't gotten married yet, they truly loved each other. The elevator left, taking the embarrassed employees with it. And the girl told Jeremy that she was offended to hear words about a possible breakup, and that she no longer wanted to hear anything like that. The case was not limited to the article, by the way. The news on all channels trumpeted that the relationship of the grandson of the chairman of one of the largest companies continues to develop. This information could not pass by Lucy, even though she was behind bars. No, it can't be that Charlie married him, and he turned out to be so rich. The cellmates did not share Lucy's tragedy. They called the staff to somehow calm her down. Lying in the infirmary, she kept searching for enlightenment. What could she do to prevent Charlie from becoming happy? Of course, all she can do is call. She just needs to choose the right person. The girl went out to the employees to beg them to give her a phone. She didn't call anyone this month. She really needs to talk to her family. Will they really refuse her? It was forbidden, but she was still given the opportunity to call. Lucy resolutely dialed her father's number. Although he asked not to call this number, she has something to say. Is he still dating that woman for whom he left his wife? Let him tell his faithful wife that her little daughter is marrying a rich man. You must visit the bride, or better yet, show up right at the wedding. Lucy gave the address and, in the final seconds of the conversation, demanded not to tell anyone that it was she who called. When the company finds out what family Charlie came from, they will immediately fire her. And even if not, the chairman will not allow his grandson to marry such a ragamuffin. Unsuspecting Charlie soon sat calmly in the office and wrote to Jeremy that she was already getting ready. Yanin came up to her and whispered that at the entrance her birth mother was waiting for her. But that cannot be. This woman left home many years ago. Why would she return now? Charlie still went downstairs. Downstairs, a shabbily dressed woman was indeed waiting for her, bursting into tears at the sight of the girl. This is truly her precious daughter. The mother immediately rushed impetuously to embrace her daughter. That very woman from the photograph. She really came back. A timid smile touched Charlie's lips. Her mother had come to her. Was she probably missing her? They did not see Jeremy at that moment, but he saw them perfectly well and was already calling someone to clarify the situation a bit. So Charlie and her mother were sitting in a cafe and listening to stories about why they had met only now. The mother claimed that she was there all the time but was ashamed to approach. Now she doesn't even ask to be forgiven. It will be enough for her if they can occasionally see each other. The waiter placed a plate with an omelet in front of the girl, and her mother immediately noticed that as a child she had loved eggs and apparently still did. But if she remembered her habits so well and thought about her, if she really wanted to come, then why didn't she call even once? Why didn't she come to her father's funeral? Charlie had too many questions for this woman, but she didn't want to ask them. There would be an excuse anyway. After the cafe, the woman went to see her daughter home, but refused to come in for a visit. She is satisfied that they have eaten and walked. She does not want to impose herself. Then Charlie finally decided to ask, did she come because she saw the article about the wedding? However, it seemed that the woman had heard about marriage for the first time. The girl then said that there was actually no wedding, although she did have a boyfriend. But the woman stated that only the girl's happiness was important to her. And for the first time in many long years, Charlie was able to hug her and call her mother. If she had heard the phone conversation that took place between her mother and her husband, she would not have rushed to rejoice. The woman told him about her plans to pretend to be a loving mommy and squeeze money out of her daughter for as long as possible. They will be able to cover all debts and live beautifully. A good girl won't leave her mommy without her rich boyfriend's money. Completely satisfied with the situation, the woman snapped her phone shut and, humming, went about her business. She did not see the young man standing beyond the boundary of the lighted circle. but he saw and heard her. Jeremy came out into the light to talk to the woman. He is that very wealthy groom, and she can make all her demands on him. Oh, really? So this is her future son-in-law? He didn't hear anything, did he? But he heard. He doesn't want to listen to these tales of hot love for Charlie. How much does she need? What is he saying? How can one behave like that with one's future mother-in-law? This is an outrageous injustice. She will tell her daughter everything. Let her then tell at the same time how she took all the savings in the name of Charlie and all the money that her father had saved and invested it in her lover's business. Let her tell how she saw the article about the wedding and finally deigned to overcome those 2 hours of driving that separated her from her daughter all this time. How dare he speak like that? Has he checked her personal data? Okay, so be it. She will do as he wants. Let him give her money, only then will she leave and not hang around Charlie. A woman handed Jeremy a note with her details to receive money into her account and left, extremely pleased that she wouldn't have to pretend to be a loving mother. She didn't know that the phone in her bag was on and broadcasting this conversation at full volume. To whom? To Charlie, who simply accidentally dialed the wrong number. The girl sat on the floor in tears. No, she knew she wasn't needed by this woman, knew that she had come only for the money, but finally she had a mom. For just a few hours. Jeremy, standing alone in the rain, received a message that the girl wanted to be alone and he should not come to her. Oliver was bowing low that evening, greeting a stylishly dressed woman at the airport. She was displeased that Jeremy did not come to meet her, although she admitted that he might have his own business. And Charlie seemed even proud that she didn't do that. A smart girl, not rushing headlong. The expensive car cut through the rain, standing out against the backdrop of cheap taxis. The woman discussed with Oliver Charlie's mother, who had suddenly appeared on the horizon, and her desire to extort money from her beloved daughter. The newly minted mother sat in a cafe, tormented by thoughts of whether she had done the right thing. No, she wasn't worried about the moral side of the act, it's just, what if Jeremy tells everything, and then she won't get any money? We need to win the girl over to our side. She herself scheduled a meeting to ask something. However, it was too late to pull back. Charlie quietly said that if she needed money, she could have honestly asked, since the girl herself also had money, not just Jeremy. She said that she would give the money right away if her mother told her where she had learned about the wedding. It turned out Lucy did it. She just won't calm down. Excellent. They no longer need to see each other. Charlie was about to leave. She was not at all interested in a joint dinner. But what about the money? Could she have lied? Yes. Doesn't the mother think that only she knows how to lie? Vile girl, how is she not ashamed? How dare she decided to mock her mother? Now she'll show her how to throw people away and lie, looking straight into her eyes. However, she did not have time to strike. A firm hand caught her wrist, preventing it from falling on Charlie's head. This was the very woman Oliver had met back then. She declared that she would not allow anyone to treat her precious daughter that way. Who is she? Charlie is not her daughter. Let her take her hands off. Oh no, Charlie is the company's daughter, whom they are all very proud of. The company has invested much more in this person than that wretched mother. In the end, Grace is Jeremy's mother and therefore Charlie's mother too. Let the girl go home. The adults will sort it out without her. The assistant led her away, and neither of them turned back at the mother's cries. This creature decided to abandon her own mother, and these ones are even supporting her. She thought they were well-bred rich people, but they are letting themselves go here? However, what right do people who abandon their children have to talk about any kind of upbringing? She abandoned her own daughter and husband, and now she claims that someone should take her opinion into account. Charlie's mother was horrified to hear all the sordid details about the loans, the fraud, the illegal transfer of funds, and much more. Their cohabitant will soon face criminal liability and taxes that they evaded. How could they, even drowning in debt, do this to their own daughter? The woman recoiled. What she did not expect was the naked truth dumped on her head. In the end, Grace came to promise that a quiet life no longer awaits this woman. And she will not talk and discuss anything. People talk, not pigs. Charlie's mother remained alone in the empty cafe. She was deprived of both hope and the last remnants of her self-respect. On Grace Street, Charlie and Jeremy were already waiting. The girl clung to him, finding in the young man her only support. She cried on his shoulder. Now only this person was left for her. Charlie told at home that she had overheard their conversation by chance. This is so cruel. After all, if the mother had honestly said that she needed money, she would have tried to find it, but she acted so insidiously. Then Jeremy said that in her situation, he would do the same thing and would probably feel the same feelings. For he too did not have a birth mother. Grace was a mother only to Utah. Once in childhood, he stood at the threshold of the school and waited for the driver, watching as the other children were led away by their parents. On that day, he saw Grace for the first time, who was walking towards him with a large red umbrella. She leaned towards him, and then little Jeremy saw her face for the first time. She was wearing an office suit and shoes. They were soaked, but she still walked slowly so that he wouldn't have to hurry. He understood Charlie, but he knew that she was strong and could handle it. The girl wiped away her tears. After those words, courage arose in her. After all, she herself is capable of defending herself. Charlie resolutely got up from the couch. She has somewhere to go to make the future a little easier. This place turned out to be a prison, which was also drenched by the dreary rain. The guards led Lucy out to meet Charlie. She had lost weight and some of her former beauty, but seemed to brighten up at the sight of her former friend. They were now separated only by a transparent partition. They haven't seen each other for a long time. It's high time to get rid of this problem. Lucy grinned maliciously. Charlie must have come to complain about the sudden breaking off of the engagement. But no, the girl smiled and said that everything was wonderful between her and Jeremy. And what's wrong with Lucy's face? Surely she's not happy for her friend. After all, she tried so hard to bring her birth mother back to her. Lucy recoiled. Why was she behaving like that? Why did she hate Charlie so much? Oh, she has reasons, and only a complete idiot can fail to understand them. Once upon a time, it was precisely because Charlie's mother refused to raise her lover's daughter without taking her own that Lucy's father left the family and did not take the child with him. If it weren't for her friend, she could have grown up with her father and not in this utter darkness that her mother surrounded her with. Charlie took everything away from her: her father, her husband, her job, and even her free will. Everything was simply stolen from her. How dare she ruin someone else's happiness? And now she's come here and is playing the innocent saint. But Charlie's face remained calm. What a pathetic Lucy. She should have looked at reality. Pitiful and scrawny now, was only the one of them who was under guard. Lucy will no longer be able to take anything away from her, for now Charlie has the power to protect what belongs to her. No, where is she going? Let her stay, let her talk some more. It's so scary to sit here alone. They will never see each other again. Lucy's loneliness concerns no one. Everything that once united them has sunk into oblivion. Nothing connects them anymore. It's a pity that such a large part of life was a lie. Jeremy was already waiting outside. The rain ended, and, illuminated by the sunlight, they could look into the clear sky and hope for a bright future. Soon the two of them went to visit Utah. She was waiting for them and was glad to see them. There they were awaited by the chairman together with Grays. They had set the table, preparing for an important day. They all sat down together. Charlie was embarrassed by the close attention, but it was her birthday, and everyone was trying to please her. She was even brought a wonderful cake. The girl could not overcome her excitement. After all, the chairman himself was sitting at the same table with her. But everything around seemed to be waiting only for her smile, pressing in from all sides. They sat at the table for several hours and said goodbye at sunset. Grace then handed the girl a congratulatory letter that she had written herself shortly before that day. Besides, the woman asked to call her mom. Now they are all one family, and there is no place for formalities in a family. Getting into the car, Charlie opened the letter. It was the warmest thing she had ever received from her mother in her entire life. Grace wrote that she was glad to have such a daughter-in-law and wished her to pay less attention to rumors and speculations. Charlie didn't even notice when she fell asleep, and when she woke up, she found that they had arrived in Pusan and were sitting in the car by the sea. Jeremy was holding a bunch of papers in his hands. Was he going to hold some kind of briefing here? A young man began to list what he was holding in his hands: stocks, property documents. Charlie nervously interrupted him. Was he really going to pass all of this on to her? Jeremy interrupted her and handed her a receipt, in which he signed that after the wedding he would be obliged to support any of Charlie's business endeavors. And of course, for her happiness, he is ready to do everything possible. It was too cute. Charlie, having worried too much, opened the window to breathe some fresh air. He understood that everyone has their own criteria for happiness, and he would certainly make mistakes too. Then Charlie remembered the words of the taxi driver who took her from the hospital. Soon she would be healthy and young, would briskly run errands and find herself a wonderful young man. Here he is, the young man who will make her happy. The box opened, revealing to Charlie's gaze a beautiful and clearly very expensive ring. However, after all, he already knows that she is not going to get married, and even with that in mind, he spent so many hours behind the wheel and so diligently described all the charms of life after marriage. But it doesn't matter that she doesn't want to get married yet. She truly loves him. Why don't they try living together? They will definitely be happy. The next day, they didn't even have to go to work to encounter new disturbing news. The cafe where Hugh worked was closing. But the main thing is how Utah is doing there. Jeremy said that the young man liked her. Charlie was stunned. She didn't know that. Is Jeremy really more perceptive than Charlie? How she would not be offended. In the evening, the girl ran to Utah's house, and as soon as the door opened, she shouted out that Hugh was leaving for study in Switzerland. And although she claimed that she didn't care, and there was absolutely no reason why she should go to the airport tomorrow, she still couldn't hold back her tears. If they are nothing to each other, then why did Hugh leave a piece of dessert every day? He knew that Charlie wouldn't come. Utah is not her replacement, she is herself. And he was making cappuccino pudding, the very one that Jeremy's girlfriend couldn't stand the smell of, but his sister loved with all her heart. Tomorrow came when an unsuspecting Hugh calmly walked through the airport looking for his gate. Here, a scream rang out across the entire airport. Utah had finally come to the meeting after all. Taking a deep breath, she said loudly and clearly that she liked him, and now he could do with this information whatever he wanted. At first, Hugh apologized as if there was something to apologize for, and then asked to wait until he could prepare a dessert worthy of Utah. He said that every time he prepared a dessert, he thought about how much the pudding or pastry would appeal to the girl. But once Charlie dropped by, and he gave the dessert to her without regrets. Then he realized that he had not completely forgotten his past love. But if by the time he returns, Utah has no one else, and if he can fill his heart with only her, then he will propose that they start dating and be together. Then she took the hair tie off her hair and handed it to the young man. He must, without fail, return before it breaks. While they stood together, the first snow fell. Less than an hour later, the plane had already carried Hugh to Switzerland. Utah stood until the last, looking after him, and then left, wrapping herself more comfortably in the scarf he had left her. At that very moment, Charlie and Jeremy stood looking at the same snow through the window, enjoying the tranquility of the winter morning. Time passed. The young man's persistence managed to melt the heart of the unapproachable beauty, and she agreed to the wedding. The event was striking in its scale. Workers were running back and forth, brushing away the petals of the blooming cherry tree. Charlie looked gorgeous in her dress, quite unlike how she had looked during her wedding to Parker. Utah's eyes were practically jumping with little hearts from admiration when looking at the girl, and her belly was hardly visible, even though Charlie was expecting twins. Utah's phone rang here. It was Hugh, who had just returned from Switzerland. She came out of the bride's room looking hesitantly at the screen. Was she ready for this meeting? Utah finally answered the call. Hugh unexpectedly complimented her new haircut. Could he see her? Yes, it was worth looking out of the window, and she saw a young man, with a suitcase, standing literally a few meters away from her. He returned this morning and hurried to the wedding. In fact, the celebration was just an excuse to meet with Utah, and he brought her an entire suitcase of the finest Swiss chocolate. Every time he saw something beautiful or delicious, he remembered her. It was unintentional, but he realized over time, whoever came and whatever they asked for, it was all only for Utah. And besides, he kept his promise. Her rubber band hasn't broken until now. Unable to restrain herself, Utah threw herself around Hugh's neck. How she had really been waiting for him. Together they congratulated Charlie. The young man was going to start his business more thoroughly, and the girl did not intend to let him go anywhere. The Chet couple came with their friends, very happy for Charlie. The doors flung open, and Yanin's daughter rushed in. She had grown a little and now ran ahead of her mother. Behind her, of course, came Yanin herself, accompanied by Derek. Together they were photographed amid the joyful cries of the girl, who was convinced that they had met a fairy. Jeremy looked as if he would soon lead an army into battle like a commander, but it was enough to think about future children, and his face flushed with embarrassment and happiness. The chairman handed Charlie a bouquet that he had made himself. Although it was not perfect, it was put together with great love. The girl was very touched. Mrs. Pani, of course, was also present at the wedding. She was generally the most important guest. When the fully prepared Charlie finally appeared before Jeremy, the wind seemed to deliberately tear off the cherry blossom petals and envelop her in a gentle pink hue. The groom was dumbfounded, gazing at her in rapture. Of course, Utah did not fail to snicker at him for this reason. So they were ready to walk down the wedding aisle towards a happy family life. He had waited for her for so long, but if necessary, he would have waited just as long. The ceremony was conducted by the chairman himself, who insisted that he could not entrust such an important matter to anyone else. A small distance from the crowd stood a table with a photograph of Charlie's father. It was as if he too had come to see her off into a happy future. They were pronounced husband and wife. And though they no longer knew their future, now they had each other and could count on the support of so many good people. At this wedding, a true friend caught the bouquet. Utah impatiently shuffled in place, ready to catch the symbol of her future marriage. The celebration flowed in its course. Someone was crying, someone was delighted with the delicious cake, but everyone was united by a common atmosphere of happiness and pride. In the end, here they all are. Family and friends, people who will never leave Charlie and Jeremy, people who have been there all this time and again offered a helping hand. Months flew by as if they never existed. Charlie was about to give birth to twins. Pushing in her belly, they kept waking her up, and with her, Jeremy, who was more worried than the expectant mother. The girl looked at herself in the mirror with anxiety. Her face had rounded, her skin had darkened, her entire body was covered in stretch marks. But lying in bed, she still could not stop thinking about the hot, tasty pork knuckles. If you dip them in sauce, add garlic paste and eat it all at once, how wonderful it would be. But she has already gained too much weight. Yes, and Jeremy has to go to work early tomorrow, but how I crave pork knuckles. The girl burst into tears, unable to hold back. However, Jeremy clearly wasn't thinking about himself or her weight. Waking up from her crying, he immediately jumped up and headed to the store for chicken legs. Returning and looking lovingly at how the girl was eating, Jeremy said that she had indeed gained a little weight, but had only become more beautiful and sweeter. In the end, that's why he married her. She's so sweet and takes such good care of him. And since she's worried about it, why don't they go for a walk? It doesn't matter that she has gained a little weight if her beloved husband likes her that way. She could not win by trying to convince him that she loved him more, for he was resolutely ready to give her more love. When the day of the operation came, Jeremy was much more worried than Charlie. He could not let her give birth herself. It was much more dangerous, especially since they were having twins. They turned to the best doctors. Everything will definitely be all right. Waiting for his wife in the corridor, Jeremy emanated such an aura of anxiety that an employee handed him a heart pill, lest the boss, God forbid, suffer a stroke. The chairman was in the same horror Utah was praying, and only Grace was calm. The father-in-law was so worried that he also demanded to be given a pill here and a sedative on top of it. Finally, the doors swung open, and a nurse appeared on the threshold, summoning the father. 2 boys were completely healthy and were born with a very small difference. Charlie was also fine. Now they had become real parents. Jeremy was so happy that he nearly burst into tears right there in the ward. The others were not allowed into the ward, but they filmed everything through the glass with a camera. In the first photo of the babies, they were crying together with the chairman, but Utah was smiling happily. Finally, she had become an aunt. Sometime later, the girl was already joyfully flying to the home of the newly minted parents to see the slightly stronger babies for the first time. However, there was a surprise waiting for her at the intercom. She could not ring the doorbell so as not to wake the children up. The door was opened by Jeremy, whose whole appearance said, "It is really impossible to wake him up." The whole house was cluttered with bottles and nipples, littered with toy horses and blocks. Chari was at a massage, and her father had a lot of things to do before her return. At the moment when Jeremy was washing the dishes reactively fast, crying broke out. First one child woke up, and then the second one from his cry. The harsh reality of parenthood forced one to rush from one task to another. But Yuta was not worried about that for now. She could afford to amuse the child with funny faces, without getting tangled up in 100 duties. It seemed the child liked it. The baby started hiccuping, and little could delight Yuta more than that, although the tired Jeremy did not share her delight, at least visually. He put the second baby to bed, and said that if she liked it so much, then let her watch over the children while he took a little nap. Let it still be day, but if he sleeps now, he will be able to help Charlie with the children at night as well. He fell to the floor and immediately passed out, once again bringing to Yuta thoughts about the hardships of parenthood. Soon, Charlie returned from the massage, looking fresh and rested. Although Yuta handled 2 children at once perfectly well without her, they all had an equally good time. The girl approached her husband. Looking at him affectionately, she thought how sweet he was and how hard he was trying. He woke up immediately, and they began, it seems, to measure who of them was sweeter and who loved whom more. And Yuta and the twins watched this with great displeasure from behind the door. Soon Yanin also came to visit the children. She was worried that she had arrived with snacks too early. But Yuta insisted that her mother had arrived just in time, otherwise she and the infants would not have survived this wave of tenderness that swept over the spouses. Having put the men to sleep, they sat down at the table. Nothing could delight the girls more than delicious meat. At work, everyone realized how difficult it was without Charlie and how much work she did. The girl was happy to hear that her contribution was so valuable. She was even embarrassed to learn how much she was expected at work, and also what a sickly sweet couple they seemed to Yuta. Although she herself should have held her tongue, she herself was like sugar syrup when the conversation turned to someone. Her happy face was just screaming, "Ask me why I'm so pleased, ask!" Yanina went to meet him. Well, who is he, this mysterious young man? Of course, this little one who brews coffee and makes desserts is Hugh. Precisely a little one, Yuta called him, embarrassing everyone around, so she certainly had no right to complain about the sweetness of Charlie and Jeremy. As for Yanina herself, this conversation embarrassed her terribly. She absolutely refused to acknowledge mutual affection with Derek, insisting that he was nothing more than a work colleague. However, she accidentally mentioned that he had recently stayed overnight at her place. Of course, the girls could not ignore this and pressed her, demanding to tell everything. This shocked her friends, so that Yanina physically felt how their curiosity nailed her to the chair. From the established hubbub, even the fatigue-slain Jeremy woke up. It was another rainy evening in Korea. Yanin was sitting at work. On that day, Yuta stayed to help her. She didn't want to go out in the rain, and the overtime pay wouldn't be too bad either. Derek, who was about to leave, also decided to stay, although his motivation was more than understandable. The 3 of them handled it quickly, while one girl would definitely have been sitting until night. Who would have thought that the cause of the argument that evening would be the way of getting home? Who would take whom and where? In the end, they decided to go by Derek's car with the 3 of them, but before that to sit in a cafe. Yuta and the manager got together and decided to order alcohol and Sprite to go with it. Yanin simply couldn't dissuade them. She had to come to terms with the drinking youth. But they were having so much fun that in the end she gave in and also asked for a pour. As a result, they emptied several bottles and plates. Yanin turned out to be the drunkest, who apparently simply could not drink. She found it very tasty, very fun, and at the same time sad. Derek was charmed by her behavior and thought that perhaps she was right after all that she rarely drinks, since she couldn't stop. She even, driven by good impulses, almost forcibly fed him. In general, in the end, I had to call Yanina's mother to find out her address and deliver the girl home. She immediately grabbed her phone and thus ruined all attempts to convince her parents that she hadn't drunk that much. From joy, she quickly moved to deep sadness, as often happens. They did tell her not to marry that man. Yanin burst into tears, and Derek tried to comfort her, patting her on the back. Yuta, of course, clearly understood the atmosphere and hurried to leave under the pretext of meeting with a guy. And here, the boss will already be delivered home by Derek. Yes, she has already sent him the address. The next morning was difficult for Yanin. The sunlight, along with a headache, made her regret waking up at all. But none of this prevented her from remembering about her daughter, who was late for kindergarten. As soon as she left the room, she immediately got it from her mother. "How could you drink so much? Aren't you ashamed?" She went dejectedly to drink broth and get ready for work, and gratefully accepted a mug from Derek. And first she took a sip, and only then did she realize who exactly had given her this mug. What is he doing here? They are at her house, aren't they? She doesn't remember at all what happened. Again, Mother materialized nearby. How is she not ashamed? She doesn't even remember anything. She loaded the wonderful colleague so heavily. And yet she offered him to stay overnight yesterday, and it turns out she vomited. Good thing not on his clothes. What a disgrace. Maybe she deservedly got it from her mother. The daughter was ready to go to the kindergarten. It seems she was happy that Derek would take her to the kindergarten. Memories gradually returned. There they were walking down the street yesterday. She was rushing ahead, and he was walking behind, worried that the girl might fall. However, not only did she fall herself, but she almost dropped him in a burst of joy. As a result, he carried her on his back so that Yanin would not injure either herself or him. How embarrassing, she simply went crazy. Only at the gates of the kindergarten did Yanin gather the courage to ask for forgiveness, but he seemed quite satisfied with the previous evening. Getting into the car, they were already discussing hiking trips to the mountains. However, he did not like hiking in the mountains, but Miss Yanin, and he was not shy to declare it directly. In the end, he is promising and capable. He wants to be with her, so why doesn't she give him even a chance? Let her like him, but she states honestly and directly, she is not going to marry him. She already has a daughter, she is already divorced. He'd better find himself a young girl and be with her. Besides, his parents are also unlikely to approve of such a relationship and the lack of grandchildren. On that day, he took a day off, and the next day he unexpectedly approached her in the elevator and assured her that it was time to leave. But of course they got the wrong floor, so they had to go by the stairs. He clearly did it on purpose. Everyone was taking the elevator, so there was an opportunity to talk in private. Derek handed Yanin a receipt stating that his parents did not mind if he did not get married, and if he did get married he would not demand anything from his father. He had 3 older brothers, each of whom had children, so his parents did not insist on another wedding. Now he can openly propose to her to date. Yanina could not make up her mind. She was afraid to start a relationship with him, although she really wanted to, and the most exciting thing was that he understood it better than she did herself. He was ready to date for 100 years without a wedding, just to be with her. This was already the 3rd confession he made to her. He took a candy out of his pocket that his daughter Yanin had given him. If she ate it now, it would be considered consent to date. If not, nothing would happen. He would simply disappear from her mind. But she didn't want that. The girl quietly agreed to eat the ill-fated candy. She didn't want him to disappear. So the gift for her daughter united her mother with a man who became a little more than a colleague. The next day they came for lunch together. Yuta noticed that the girl's lipstick was smeared. She had to hastily justify herself that she was brushing her teeth. Yes, before lunch, and so on. Yuta herself was very worried. Soon she had to go on a business trip to Indonesia, and Hugh would be left here alone. What should she do? Not brand him. The next day, she sat with him in a cafe and praised the new dessert. He even thought about not adding the novelty to the menu. He wanted to cook such delicious things only for her. Hugh was already bored in advance, although the girl was still sitting right in front of him. But in that case, why doesn't he ask her to marry him? Was he really not planning to marry her? She's leaving for so long. She did not want to leave him alone. The girl resolutely handed him a box with rings, proposing to him. However, Hugh did not rush to agree, and hesitated somehow. Yuta immediately put the ring away, embarrassed and dissatisfied with such a reaction. She immediately hurried to the exit, demanding that he should not follow her under any circumstances, otherwise she would be too upset. Discussing this with her girlfriends, Yuta quickly realized if he had proposed to her just sitting at a cafe table, she herself would have been terribly dissatisfied. Apparently, she really should have created a more romantic setting. But it's okay, you just need to try again, then he won't be so stunned, everything will work out. Charlie suggested making a proposal at the hotel, however they had never been alone at a hotel before. Both turned out to be very shy. Then you need to use a cliché that has stood the test of time. They are promising rain on the weekend. And here they arrived at the pier, getting ready to go on a romantic cruise. Yuta definitely knew that he liked such quiet places. She knew everything about him in general. They had already swum to a small island, and there Yuta coordinated everything with Charlie. Everything was ready, the owner of the cottage had been warned. The promised rain began. Of course, purely by chance, none of them had an umbrella, and they had to take shelter in the little house. Hugh put Yuta to bed so that she wouldn't get cold without a blanket. It was warm and cozy. It was making her sleepy, but she really tried not to fall asleep. Of course, the girl did not succeed in this, and sometime later she jumped up, fearing that the time was lost. But no, the hostess of the cottage promised to say when the boat was leaving, so Yuta could sleep peacefully. The hostess did indeed appear in the doorway right away. It turned out that because of the rain, the boat could not set sail today. They would have to spend the night here. A couple sat on the porch, enjoying the patter of rain. It was so good. Probably it was the best moment to propose. But before she had a chance to open her mouth, Hugh kissed her. For just a few seconds, he asked her to close her eyes and reached into his pocket to, unclear what. None of them had time to do anything because a helicopter appeared above them, from which Jeremy's voice was heard. He came for his sister, the damn rescuer. Yes, and not alone. His grandfather came with him. How did they even find out where she was? Did they track her phone? We had to leave quickly, before the suspicious relatives ruined the whole atmosphere. Besides, Yuta actually had an umbrella, and they could hide. It turned out that Hugh also had an umbrella. They had simply both chosen to take shelter from the rain in the little house. Actually, it was all very romantic, even the fact that they were practically chased after. Yuta went into the shed to hide, while Hugh with her phone headed to the other end of the island to throw Jeremy off the trail. He is not in any danger, but the girl had better stay here. Waiting for the young man, Yuta looked at the rings in the new box. Damn Jeremy. She had helped him so much to build a relationship with Charlie, and now he was hindering her from arranging her own wedding? The door burst open. A mysterious hooded figure entered the shed. Suddenly it became cold and frightening. However, it turned out to be just Charlie, who brought a raincoat and ordered to follow her. Where is she from? And what about Hugh? Should she be worried? Probably it was worth it. Jeremy was waiting for them at the other little house. He told her to go inside and under no circumstances let her grandfather know that she had not spent the night at home. And inside, Yuta was greeted by a multitude of candles and Hugh surrounded by flickering light. He arranged all this to surprise her. In his hands was a small box, and one could think that he wanted to propose to her. However, there was a watch in the box. It seemed that Yuta did not understand at all what was happening. He explained, the watch is set to Indonesian time, so that he can always wear it and think about what his wife is doing. Getting down on one knee, he held out a box with a watch to her. No, he didn't deserve her, so strong, kind, and sincere, but he really wanted to be with her. Unexpectedly, Yuta burst into tears. What's this? Could it be that she no longer wants to marry him? No, she actually really wants to, and she herself was going to propose to him. Hugh put a watch on the girl's wrist. How could he not love her? How could he not want to marry her? At the exit, Charlie and Jeremy were waiting for them. It turned out that in this perfect plan there was only one unforeseen circumstance, which was precisely lurking around the corner. This was the chairman, insanely worried about Yuta. He was terribly outraged. Was this Hugh going to spend the night with his granddaughter before the wedding? True, it's not a big deal. That's why Yuta showed him the ring. Nothing illegal, they're already engaged. This agitated the chairman even more. Where to get married? Why? Jeremy led the chairman away to calm him down. Charlie had to admit that she knew about Hugh's plan before Yuta decided to propose to him. The peace was established during a tea party at the table. The chairman had to come to terms with the fact that Yuta would leave the native nest. This was the happiest boat trip in her entire short life. Charlie and Jeremy were happy for them. The chairman could not cope with his emotions in any way. Oh, all his grandchildren are already so grown up. They have also finally found their happiness. Sitting at the laptop, Charlie was slowly bringing her plan to life. She bought 50 bitcoins. After all, knowledge of the future is a great trump card when it comes to investing. There's nothing better than money after all. She could have rested, but it's better to work in order to earn more in the future. Jeremy came in. Instead of telling him what she planned to spend the money on, she fed him a piece of cake. A small smudge of cream left over from the piece she had eaten herself. The girl licked it off, and at that moment she was sweet, like the first time. Jeremy couldn't resist and kissed her. Well, who allowed her to be so beautiful? The man was acting too fast. She tried to slow him down. Why don't they go to the bed? Interrupting the action, Jeremy's phone rang. It was none other than one of those employees who usually didn't call just like that. But he didn't really want to answer this call, so he was about to put the phone aside to simply ignore the call. Charlie turned out to be more mischievous than he thought. She herself accepted the challenge and put the phone to her husband's ear. He was thinking about something completely different, but now he was forced to speak, and she giggled, pleased with her prank. And it's not just a giggle. Charlie continued what they were interrupted from and touched Jeremy's neck with her lips. With difficulty, he managed to finish speaking and hung up as soon as he could. And where did she learn this from? Charlie stated that books were the source of knowledge. Well, then he would also act as they do in books. Jeremy swept everything off the table to seat the girl on its surface. Is he really wanting it right here? What if the kids come in? No, they won't be there. The man has already put them to bed, and now is the perfect time to start before someone gets the idea to call him. Charlie was embarrassed, as if for the first time. Well, what a handsome husband she has. It's good that he bought such a large and comfortable table. What's inconvenient is the clothes. Now is the time to unbutton them. But if he wants to do this, then they will have to move to the bed. Charlie did not want to stay in the office. It was simply inconvenient there. Sometime later, the girl was already talking about how she didn't expect to be so happy in marriage. Memories of her previous marriage were still alive in her memory, and then she didn't think at all that someone would want to enter into such a relationship voluntarily. Jeremy was ready to make her even happier. Just let her say what she wants. But the girl, to be honest, needed only him alone. Although if he really wants to buy her something, then let him buy bitcoins. She won't tell him what she wants to do until it comes to fruition, but it's really a good and safe thing. Of course he will buy her what she wants. He is sure that Charlie will make himself and other people happy. Winter came. Charlie had long since returned to work, where everything flowed in its usual course and gradually changed. Miss Yanin became the head of the department, and its activities were briskly on the rise under her leadership. Yuda headed the international department and spent most of her time in Indonesia. Her idea of halal food turned out to be more than successful. She herself remained a manager. It was from this position close to her heart that she resigned. She had a plan for which she had been saving bitcoins, and that's why she was leaving her job with a light heart. Her colleagues, now former, were not so happy and did not want to let her go at all. She is very grateful to Yanin for the time they spent together, but there is no need to grieve. After all, they will continue to communicate. That day she went to visit her friend. Her daughter had already grown up and was going to the 4th grade, but for now, on the weekends, she was building a big snowman. The girl was very happy to see Charlie, and Derek did not arouse such delight. In fact, she liked him, but why didn't he marry her mother? It's not nice to do that. Almost immediately, Jeremy joined them with the twins, who had also grown noticeably and should not have been sitting on their father's lap. With Yanin's daughter, they were very friendly. She loved them and entertained them with pleasure. The children left, choosing what to play. Looking at them, Miss Yanin sometimes wanted to have a second child. Her daughter would not be bored, and children are always so sweet. It seems Derek wouldn't mind a son or daughter, although they both understood that these words were just shenanigans. The boys were already making a lot of noise, having failed to share something. It took them less than half an hour to find a reason to quarrel. Attempts by Yanin's daughter to distract them with a doll were unsuccessful. At that moment, the girl thought she was glad there was no sister or brother. Everyone sat down at the table together. They often gathered like this, so they felt like one big family when eating together like that. In fact, today Charlie and Jeremy became an unemployed couple, the dream of any office worker. Finally, Grace and the chairman arrived. They did not miss a single event where something important for the family could happen. But the chairman was a kind grandfather, only for Charlie and Jeremy. For the rest, he was their direct superior. And while Yanina had somehow gotten used to him, Derek was terribly nervous. Grace understood the atmosphere created by the presence of the bosses, so she promised not to let her husband linger and take him away as soon as possible. The lights went out and the room was illuminated by candles. Someone brought in a cake. Yuta was the one bringing congratulations on the dismissal. Of course, she couldn't miss such an event. Charlie didn't expect to see the girl. She was supposed to be on a business trip, but she flew in as a surprise. She was not alone. Hugh came in with her. There was a suspicion that Yuta had flown in primarily to see her beloved husband, but it was still very nice to see her. Yanin even voiced these assumptions out loud. The girl vehemently denied everything. And she didn't have a chance to say anything wrong. Grandpa immediately pounced with hugs, for he so rarely saw his beloved girl. Everyone raised their glasses. To drink to dismissal is a sacred thing. Everyone tensed up when the chairman began his toast speech. Yuta didn't even have time to sit down after pouring the alcohol. Grace was right there. She interrupted her husband so that he wouldn't go on and let the young people have a drink. Charlie felt cozy and calm, especially because Jeremy was holding her hand. She was fired, but he would support her in any endeavor. Let him no longer be the director of the department where Charlie works, but her personal director. This was her first and last company, and today the doors of this company closed behind her. It was there that she met all these wonderful people who went through all the problems and difficulties side by side with her. Besides these people, she also had a beloved cat. Pani would not get off the lap of one or the other owner, warming them with her warmth. If you look closely, she's not so simple, this cat. Pani remembered how she had last seen her mother. Back then, she had gone hunting, promising to return as soon as possible. But she did not return, and the kitten went to search. The searches were fruitless and long, and then the rain started too. Mrs. Payne would have spent her last hours there if after the rain ended, Charlie and Jeremy had not appeared before her. They gave her food, so delicious that Pani had not eaten for a long time. The girl called her a beauty and little one. She knew that Pani had lost her mother. The cat then remembered her mother's tales of certain servants who are sometimes encountered on the way. She too once had kind servants. They died, and the new people did not want to keep the animal at home. That's how she ended up on the street. Apparently, this girl is now her servant. She is kind, she has food, and she understands what a wonderful and beautiful Pani she is. Together they played, communicated, and the little cat became more and more convinced that this was her human. Then she decided that Malishka was the name her servant had given her. Once a man who sometimes came with a servant brought her food. There was no servant nearby, but she was hungry, so little one came out and tried the treat. It turned out to be in vain. The food was clearly poisoned. The little one could have died if she had not been picked up by the second person she saw after waking up. Jeremy took her to the clinic and paid for the treatment. Then he decided to take her to his place, and he also came up with a new name, Kompani. In Korean, the word Kompani means mold. Supposedly in accordance with her coloring. What mold? She's Malishka. But she needs shelter, so let her take her in. The little one will still wait for her true servant. The temporary servant's home was not so bad. Sometimes, of course, he behaved strangely, and she had to observe this. He was telling about some person whom he could not bring himself to approach. He would often start rehearsing the same phrases and acting out imaginary situations, causing the smart Malishka to have many questions about his mental state. Then Charlie's wedding took place. Pani knew nothing about it, but she could judge the condition of the temporary servant by his return. He stopped smiling. That day and after, he no longer rehearsed anything, but from time to time he drank, although he had not done so before. She lived like that with the temporary servant until one day one of his colleagues came to the apartment. A man pressed the cat to himself, shaking with sobs. Dead? What does it mean? Dead? Probably he went to some other planet, as soon happened with Malishka as well. She also went to the cat planet. Actually, if you think about it, the temporary servant wasn't too bad. When she meets him, she will no longer hunt for his legs and tear up his sofa. The cat thought so until an unfamiliar nice person came and took her away by taxi from the cat planet. Then her second life began, in which she recognized the temporary servant as the real one and then met her beloved maid. She purred with all her might, trying to say, "Don't you remember me? It's me, little one." One night, the beloved servant told about knowing such a beautiful and kind little cat. That little cat had gone missing, probably taken by some good person. It was her. It was Malishka, and she was doing well. At least she lived in peace until the twins couldn't walk. As soon as they learned to do so, they immediately began to torment the poor cat with their games. Only the beloved maid defended little one from their encroachments. And there was a kind person who often came and distracted the children, giving Pani moments of respite. Sometimes a big man would come who would always ask why they even kept her. In fact, he loved little one and brought her treats, so she allowed him to hang around her servants. Together they were a big family. Only such a family deserved the great cat Malishka. And Charlie still realized her dream. Her assistant came into her office, informing her that a visit to the children's hospital was scheduled for today. She had no reason to go to the hospital. Besides business matters, Amelia was waiting for her there. Over the course of 10 years, Charlie managed to accumulate a lot of bitcoins. She invested part of the money and used part of it to establish a foundation. The life given by her father, she wanted to live with meaning. That's why she founded a fund that helped give life to other people. In the incubator in one of the wards lay a tiny girl. It was thanks to the Charlie Foundation that she was able to meet this little one. Covered in sensors with a tube in her nose, she didn't look at all like a happy little child should look. She was only a month old, but she already had coarctation of the aorta. Her mother died in childbirth, so there was no one to take care of the child. Relatives were also gone. The only salvation for Amelia was the foundation. For the first time seeing the girl, Charlie reached out her hand to her, and the baby grabbed her finger and laughed. This struck the girl right in the heart. In her past life, around the same time, Charlie also lived in a hospital. Back then, no one came to visit her either. She remembered this feeling, the amazing feeling of pain from the realization of loneliness and uselessness, which made physical pain insignificant. Returning from the hospital and learning the date scheduled for the surgery, Charlie told Jeremy about the baby. She would like to go to the hospital, but she has things to do. It's a pity that the little one won't get any support. Charlie honestly admitted that she saw herself in this child. Back then, she too could only smile alone, hiding her inner pain. However, Jeremy did not want to let her be sad. Now she was not alone, and Amelia also had Charlie. The next day, the girl still managed to find time and was able to run to the hospital. Jeremy was already sitting there as if waiting for his wife. He came because it was important for Charlie. If she couldn't make it, the girl wouldn't be left alone. Before the surgery, the girl did not cry. She even laughed. And for some reason, this made them both feel better. Everything will be fine. Together, they will cope with everything. In a good hospital, excellent doctors will not allow the girl to suffer. Several days later, they were given the opportunity to see Amelia. She had tolerated the intervention well and was recovering. Seeing Charlie and Jeremy, the girl laughed. Almost nothing remained of the sick child, as if she had been healthy from the very beginning. The girl took Amelia in her arms. And why is she so beautiful? Of course, because she is their daughter. Their daughter is the most beautiful. They decided to adopt a girl. Even the chairman was not against it, and Jeremy was already looking forward to his grandfather melting with tenderness when looking at the child. Amelia deserved a good loving family, and they deserved a sweet daughter. Spring came again when everything began. The twins kept growing and soon had to go to school. Amelia took her rightful place in the house. They already had their third son, and Jeremy was still constantly fussing with the children and now was calling them to play soccer. The third son found common ground with the daughter and even brought her a small gift. This was a wonderful little bow, resembling a butterfly that had landed on a small, pretty head. They still loved each other, still supported each other in every endeavor. That's exactly how their happy life was supposed to look. They found their happiness.